The protagonist strikes the ground with his sword while stating that solitude is a trait belonging to the strongest. Suddenly, a centipede creature questions him about why the boy came there. Charging to attack him, the monster also asks why the boy betrayed his compatriots. Calmly, the boy turns, deflecting the blows with his sword. As the monster screams in pain, the young man replies that there was no need to say anything, as it would die anyway. Furious, the centipede tells him to go to hell and lunges to attack him once more. The MC calmly dodges while thinking that great power comes with deep solitude, and even though it is good, he's been called a wicked god. In the sky, the young man looks at the monster and before attacking states that it would be nice if they could both live freely in their next lives. With that, the boy falls towards the ground, tearing the centipede in half. The monster disintegrates and soon turns into a stone that rests in the protagonist's hand. Looking at the magical reincarnation stone, he celebrates finally having achieved it. He states that he could finally be free, and thus, upon using the item, the stone activates its effect, and the boy recounts that this was how he reincarnated into another world in the future. The boy explains that after 3 reincarnations, he stopped being the strongest magical swordsman to become a rank F adventurer. Sometime later, in another world, the boy was lying on the grass until, looking to the side, he sees his 2 beautiful friends accompanied by a cute slime. The young man smiles as he gets up and walks towards them, and in his mind, he states that this is the story of a free life. After using the reincarnation stone, the protagonist awakens in another place. Finding himself in a cave, the boy wonders where he was and even who he was. Suddenly, a status window appears calling him Aizawa Yuri, and seeing this, he realizes that this was his name. Behind Yuri, some ranky goblins arrive and surround him. He wonders what the hell those creatures were. Behind Aizawa, a voice emerges questioning what the hell the boy was doing in that place. The huge green creature asks the human what he was doing there, and we see that this was a rank B goblin lord. Our protagonist then replies that he didn't even know. The goblin lord starts to laugh and then says that the foolish human could not deceive him. The creature claims that it was sure Yuri was a servant of the Adventurers Guild, but must have gotten scared upon encountering him. But it was too late, and therefore it would not let the boy escape, so the goblin commands its entire army of little creatures to advance. Aizawa, still not understanding anything, wonders why the hell the situation had ended up like this, until looking to the side he sees a twig. The young man remembers his old days as the best magical swordsman, and in the blink of an eye he grabs the twig. Yuri thinks that his body acted on instinct and then strikes one of the approaching goblins. The other creatures, seeing one of them being thrown aside with ease, become worried, but the goblin lord notices this and orders his minions not to be afraid. Then the creatures charge once more against Aizawa. With that twig, Yuri strikes all the goblins in front of him, and thinks that his past memories reacted to a piece of wood. The goblin, seeing its army being defeated by a boy, becomes frightened. As Aizawa receives numerous system notifications about skills he had gained, Aizawa tells himself that in his past life he was the saint of the sword, and when he found a weapon, his body moved on its own. With the young man busy thinking about this, the goblin lord prepares by charging a firepower and firing it. The goblin thinks that even if Aizawa was strong, he could not have done anything against that magic. However, looking ahead, he sees the boy standing as if nothing had happened. Yuri seems to have absorbed his enemy's magic, and the frightened goblin questions how that human was alive after receiving his magical attack. However, Yuri simply recites the name of the magic and launches it at his opponent, obliterating him and causing a huge explosion. After the blow, the boy states that now that he stopped to think about it, he remembered another past life. He explains that in his past life, before being the Saint of the Sword, he was a demon emperor. At this moment, Yuri begins to analyze his status window that shows all the powers he had from his past lives. The young man starts to explain that he has reincarnated 3 times in that world, and in his first life, he was a slave of a company. In his first reincarnation, he was an emperor demon, and in the second, a sword saint. However, now in his 3rd reincarnation, the memories of his other past lives reside within him. Some memories swirl in his head, and he remembers some villagers begging for help. However, the same villagers, upon seeing the young man atop a pile of bodies after doing what was asked of him, begin to call him a monster for being so powerful. Back to the present moment, the boy was climbing to exit that cave. Upon encountering the outside, the young man is impressed and states that he wanted so much to rid himself of his past life that he even reincarnated again. Yuri comments that he was tired of a life spent being used and then discarded, and that's why in this 3rd reincarnation, he will live only for himself. Outside the cave, Aizawa was checking all the items that Body had, and among them were a sword, money, and food. Analyzing that, the boy concludes that it was better than nothing. Looking at the rusty sword, he wonders if it was still useful, as it wouldn't be much different from a stick. Until suddenly, a new skill called Analysis is acquired, and upon using it, the boy's eyes change, and he can see some attributes and descriptions of the sword. Seeing that the weapon was very worn out, he also analyzes all his items and realizes that this skill allowed him to check the information of anything. However, Yuri states that he couldn't check the information of that place, and it would help a lot if someone were nearby. Suddenly, a sound from the forest can be heard, and the boy grabs his sword, questioning if it was a monster. Until suddenly, a cute slime appears, which leaves our protagonist confused. Heizawa notices that the slime didn't seem aggressive and therefore he would avoid unnecessary fights. Suddenly, the little creature approaches the food bag and the MC wonders if it was hungry. The boy gives a small piece of jerky to the monster, which eats it with delight. Upon doing that, the system notifies that the boy had acquired some skills related to monster taming. At that moment, the slime approaches and Aizawa, while petting it, realizes that this skill allows him to communicate with monsters. Yuri also sees that, depending on the actions, the skills he received could change until suddenly a scream can be heard. Looking to the side, Yuri sees a being that is half human, half wolf, running and asking for help. Yuri declares that, at the perfect moment, someone appeared, and thus the boy starts running. Aizawa begins to run alongside the stranger while questioning if he had a moment. The boy starts trying to ask questions to Pancho, who, even confused about who that guy was, responds that this wasn't the right time for that. Confused, Aizawa asks if something had happened. Upon hearing that question, the wolf asks the boy to look back, and thus we see a giant monster with a chicken head chasing the two. The cockatrice continues flying above them in order to capture them. Heizawa asks if the wolf would answer the questions if he defeated that creature, and desperate, the lichen responds that yes. At that moment, our protagonist draws his sword and turns to the monster. Realizing that probably sword wouldn't hurt the monster, he enchants it with magic. Then the boy fires a blue beam of light at the creature, causing the entire forest to tremble. After the dust settles, it is possible to see that the monster was split in half and half of the forest devastated, and the wolf, seeing this, becomes extremely frightened. Yuri, once again, acquires new skills as his sword shatters. Seeing this, he states that he managed to strengthen his weapon, but it alone wouldn't withstand that magic. Completely terrified, the wolf starts calling Aizawa a monster and then runs away. Aizawa quickly catches up to him and states that this wasn't what they agreed upon, and desperate, Pancho begins to plead for his life. On the other hand, the previous slime arrives and looks at the giant monster split in half, noticing an orange crystal. Advancing a bit in time, we see Aizawa explaining to Pancho that he lost his memories and didn't know where he was and needed information. Thus, Pancho states that he was almost sure that the boy was a demon in human form, but he responds that he only fights hostile opponents. Realizing that the boy in front of him truly knew nothing, the wolf decides to tell him that this is the forest area governed by the cockatrices. Pancho explains that his group was searching for rare items, and when they entered the lair of one of those monsters, he was used as bait and left to die. Sighing, he comments that he really believed in his companions, which leaves Yuri thoughtful. The wolf apologizes for speaking off-topic and explains that, to have defeated a cockatrice with one blow, Aizawa must be a very strong adventurer. Thus, the creature suggests they go to the Adventurers Guild, as if Aizawa mentions his name, they might have information about the boy. Seeing that Yuri was still confused, Pancho explains that an adventurer is a profession where you undertake missions for the guild and receive rewards. These vary between subjugating monsters, collecting valuable items, or searching for lost animals, and depending on your rank, there are many missions. Moreover, the place is about 20 kilometers away in the trading city of Redial, and hearing this, Yuri realizes that this profession also existed in one of his previous lives. Yuri decides that being an adventurer is the best thing he could do, as he wouldn't be tied to anything and would live following his own desires. Thus, Aizawa thanks Pancho for his information and states that he would try to go to the Adventurers Guild. The boy then thinks that 20 kilometers is a bit far, and so he starts to imagine ways to get around. However, suddenly, a cockatrice appears, leaving Pancho frightened. The man quickly runs away while our protagonist wonders what he should do, since his sword was broken and he might only have magic now. However, the animal lands in front of the boy and suddenly starts acting the same way the slime was acting earlier. Seeing this scene, Aizawa concludes that this was probably the slime he had tamed. Looking at its information, he realizes that the creature took that form after consuming the cockatrice's magic stone. Seeing that his slime could transform by eating magic stones, the boy concludes that he really had an interesting ability until something comes to his mind. Sometime later, we see the boy flying on top of his slime while stating that this was very good and that he could already see the desired city. After landing near the city, Aizawa thanks the slime for its help. However, Yuri says that if the creature enters the city like that, it would attract attention, and so they would have to part ways. At that moment, the young man turns around, bidding farewell to his animal. However, the creature suddenly emits a glow flying towards him. We see that the slime had returned to its original form, only much smaller. Seeing that ability, Aizawa concludes that if he walked with the slime by his side, it could be useful at some point. Walking towards the city, the boy asks if the slime wanted to accompany him, and upon receiving a yes in response, Yuri names it Lime. Inside the guild, Aizawa tells the receptionist that he wants to become an adventurer. Seeing that the boy wanted to make a new registration, she says that to start, Yuri should tell about his skills and previous experiences, but this leaves him confused. The attendant explains that due to the increase in people wanting to be adventurers, they started to take people's experience into account for selection. Remembering everything he has lived, the boy tells himself that he thinks it's wrong to talk about his past lives. So he promptly replies that he has nothing special, and the attendant says that if that's the case, it might be a bit difficult. Thus, Yuri thinks that if this is decided, there is nothing to be done and he should give up on being an adventurer. Until suddenly, another person bursts into the room thinking there was a fight. The receptionist, upon seeing him, explains everything she heard, and he quickly sighs and asks her to go prepare things. As he leaves, Yahello thinks that if a novice enters his guild, his dignity will fall, and this is not a place for incompetents like Yuri. Because of this, he will show him the reality, and at that moment, we see the young man in front of a strange object. Yahello reveals that this is a magic meter, a device that, if someone pours magical power over it, can identify the potential of the individual who did so. If the potential exceeds 30, Aizawa would be classified to be an adventurer and would be selected for the exam. The evil man thinks that there's no way a novice could get 30 on the first try, and when he recognizes his strength, he will give up. Aizawa then asks the two if, in case he broke that device, he could still take the exam. The receptionist and Yahello start to laugh, and the old man comments that it's the first time he has seen someone like Yuri. The young man asks Aizawa not to worry, as the meter can handle up to 99.99 and a beginner wouldn't break it. The young man then places his hand on the magic circle while concluding that, if that was the case, there was no need to worry. Then a light is emitted by the device. Yahello and the receptionist fall to the ground, wondering what the hell was happening as they see the meter rising higher and higher. Suddenly, the device explodes, and while Yahello is in shock, Yuri apologizes. But he concludes that this shouldn't be a problem, and still scared, Yahello says that the machine apparently needed maintenance. In his head, the young man comments that this was impossible and that kid must have done some trick. The young man is outraged that a poor bastard was doing this kind of dishonest action in his guild, even saying that Yuri was asking for punishment. Thus, Yahello says that since they didn't measure his power accurately, he would grant special permission for Yuri to take the exam. Seeing Yahello's kindness, the MC comments that the old man was a very good man until we jump to a coliseum with many people. Yahello tells Yuri that the exam will start in 3 minutes and he needs to prepare. In the midst of the crowd, Yuri realizes that there were indeed many people and being accepted must not be easy until suddenly a girl questions if he was having problems. The young girl asks if it was Yuri's first time taking this exam, with him just thinking that she was too excited. Kindly, Phil comments that if Yuri has any questions, he can ask her. Proudly, Arnett says that she has taken that exam 7 times and knew many things, which leaves Aizawa shocked. He then asks if the exam was something you do multiple times, and offended, the girl starts to cry while explaining that she failed every time, and that's why she repeated. Arnett reveals that after Yahello replaced the last examiner, the test became even harder. Yahello begins and declares that the first exam would be fencing, and whoever could defeat him would pass. At that moment, the candidate Johnny Serpent steps forward, drawing his blade. They prepare for battle and soon clash their swords. Seeing Johnny exchanging blows with the examiner, everyone realizes that he was indeed strong. Yuri notices that the two were equal in skill, but something was wrong, and at that moment, Johnny tells the examiner that he wasn't anything special. However, Yahello simply responds that with that skill, Johnny couldn't defeat him, breaking his sword in half. Seeing this, the young man is in shock, and Yahello asserts that with that skill, he would never become an adventurer and should start from the basics again. As Johnny leaves the arena, one of the competitors questions why no one could defeat the examiner. Aizawa, using his ability, realizes that what made Yahello win was the difference between their swords. The examiner decides that the next would be Aizawa and asks the young man to step forward. As Aizawa walks towards his opponent, Arnett cheers for him. Drawing his sword, Yuri thinks he wanted to see more moves from the examiner, but there was no way to avoid it since he was the second chosen. After Yuri drew his sword, everyone is confused and scared to notice that his sword was broken in half. Aizawa remembers that his sword had broken in the fight against the cockatrice, and seeing that, Yahello starts to laugh and mock his opponent's weapon. The examiner mentions that if Aizawa wanted to retire, now would be the time, as he didn't like to bully the weak, and if he accidentally killed the boy, it would be a shame for his reputation as an examiner. The MC wonders what he should do since he couldn't fight with that sword, but in any case, he would have to use it. Yuri says they could start and even claims he would win the fight in a second. Furious, Yahello charges at his opponent, insulting him and striking at him. Using his shrinkage ability, Yuri appears behind his enemy, placing his broken blade to his neck. Phil is impressed, and Yuri explains that the shrinkage technique allows him to move behind the enemy through the gap in their movements. Moreover, he used this ability a lot during his time as the sword saint and was happy to have done so even in this life without problems. The examiner drops his sword, admitting defeat and allowing Yuri to pass the exam. Seeing this, all the others watching begin to celebrate and cheer for Yuri. While Yuri wondered if he had become an adventurer, a mysterious person appeared saying that the exam was not over yet. Magni Figelos explained that he would conduct his great magic test. Suddenly, a magical object appeared in the sky and everyone was confused to see that object floating. Magni told the exam candidates that they should start using magic, and whoever broke that target would pass. Yuri thought this would be easy, but all the other candidates were frightened since the target was quite far away. Arnett said that, as expected, that exam was designed so that no one would pass. Hearing this, Yuri was confused, thinking that those people might have used some special material to make the target. Suddenly, several candidates began casting different spells towards the target. However, all of them dissipated before even getting close. They started to lament, and Aizawa wondered why everyone was using low-rank magic and if this was some rule imposed by the exam. Suddenly, Magni arrived intimidating the boy, asking what the problem was and if he was just going to watch. Laughing, the instructor said that, as he thought Aizawa didn't know magic. He explained that if you mastered one skill in your life, it was impossible to acquire another, and there was no way he could be a mage and a swordsman at the same time. The man stated that someone who couldn't use decent magic couldn't be an adventurer, and that year there were no promising candidates. Just as he was about to finish the exam failing all the candidates, Aizawa conjured a fireball, launching it towards the target. The magic grew as it approached, hitting the target and then creating a huge explosion. Everyone was startled, and one of the candidates questioned what a user of the legendary magic Inferno was doing in a place like that. Aizawa was confused, as to him it was just a normal fireball. Outside the city, a hooded figure watched the fire magic dissipate in the sky. The hooded figure stated that finally that person had awakened, but he was still very immature at the moment. And as he dissolved into darkness, the man claimed he was looking forward to the day they could meet again. In the Colosseum, Aizawa was trying to wake up his fainted instructor to find out if he had passed. That receptionist from before congratulated the young man on his approval and handed him the adventurer's license card. The girl explained that new adventurers start at rank F and gradually rise based on their achievements. Before the young woman could explain more, Arnett jumped on Yuri, shouting that she had found him. Aizawa managed to dodge, and when he looked to the side, he realized it was that girl he had met at the exam. The girl apologized for not introducing herself and stated that her name was Phil Arnett, then asking the boy to just call her Phil. After that, the girl began to press him, questioning his name until the young man gave in and revealed that he was Yuri. Arnett showed that she had also obtained an adventurer's license. Phil explained that after what Yuri did, the examiners were punished, and thus a new test was conducted and she passed successfully. For that, she thanked him, saying that all of this was thanks to Yuri, but he simply replied that he did nothing. Hearing that dialogue, some experienced adventurers felt envious of the rookie standing out so much. One of them asked his friend Zach what he thought, and the man, while looking at Yuri, stated that he was annoying. A day passed, and the boy woke up in a hotel bed. Looking out the window, he wondered how long it had been since he had slept so well. Yuri explained that in his previous life it was just battles every day and many things had happened the day before. Suddenly, the system informed him that the unassigned magical skill had been acquired, which left the MC confused, not understanding what that meant. He thought for a moment looking at the system but decided to ignore it. Yuri mentioned that, as an adventurer, he received extra money and managed to stay at an inn, and for that reason, he would sleep a little more. Ruining his plans, Arnett opened the door wishing the boy good morning. Aizawa questioned why she woke up so early while the girl was startled to see him lying on a slime. The young man explained that the bed provided by the inn was unsuitable, so the lime transformed into a bed. The MC also commented that some things happened, and that slime became his companion, and its name was Lime. Arnett remarked that the boy was really impressive for commanding monsters, which surprised Yuri with this information. Suddenly, she began to approach Lime and, with a scary face, asked if she could squeeze the little creature. Without Yuri being able to stop her, the girl was already lying on Lime, and he questions why she was there, which makes her remember something. The young woman declares that she had forgotten to tell him that the exam was not over yet. She explains that even after passing, there is still a secret exam to complete, which meant they were just temporary adventurers. Yuri thinks it would be problematic to have his license revoked, and he had no choice but to take this secret exam. Phil says he thought the boy would say that, and that's why he had accepted a popular mission, asking if he would join him. However, the MC promptly declines, which leaves the girl extremely shaken. Arnett asks why, and Yuri simply comments that he prefers to work alone, and while grateful for the offer, he suggested she find someone else. The boy heads to the door, but before leaving, he asks how he accepted a mission, which makes Arnett wonder if he was really okay alone. The girl continues to insist, as she was worried about Yuri being alone, but he says he didn't mind being by himself. Phil, still sad, states that he was nobody special or exceptional, but watching Yuri during the exam motivated her to strive to be like him. That's why she would really like to learn about Yuri's strength up close, asking once again if he would like to accompany her. Moved, Aizawa thinks that he really didn't understand anything about this world, much less about himself, and for now, it seemed better to stay with Arnett. Finally, the young man agrees to go with her, which makes the girl happy until something catches his attention. The boy asks Arnett to go ahead as he would change, and we see that something was bothering him. After the girl leaves, the young man opens the window of his room, staring at a bell in the distance and pointing at the object. Yuri begins to charge his fire magic shot and fires it at the bell. There we see that two people were watching our protagonist with binoculars, and they are quickly hit. We see that the fire bullet had struck the binoculars, and one of the targets couldn't believe Yuri had hit them from so far away. His companion decides that the best choice was to retreat from now and report this to Zach. Confused, Yuri concludes that he couldn't think of any reason for someone to be watching him, and he didn't know if he had done something to make someone hold a grudge. Until at that moment, Arnett screams calling Yuri, who responds that he was on his way. As Arnett guided Aizawa, the boy realizes he was once again in a forest. Looking to the side, he sees two small animals, rank F creatures. The two beings, upon sensing Yuri's presence, run away in fear. Seeing this, Aizawa comments that the missions were more peaceful than expected, and Arnett replies that they were indeed very lucky. She explains that this is a medicinal herb gathering mission, very popular among beginner adventurers because the risk of danger is low. Moreover, she woke up early to get in line and accept that mission, which makes her feel proud. In a completely natural manner, Yuri says that the girl is really amazing, which makes Phil embarrassed. Seeing Yuri veering off the path, Arnett explains that the northern forest was on the other side. Confused, Yuri asks if he couldn't gather herbs in that place, and the girl replies that he couldn't. Phil mentions that that place was too dangerous for them, as that was the eastern forest, a place where strong monsters live. She starts dragging Yuri while saying that the medicinal herbs are collected in the northern forest. Thinking about this, the MC remembers that he woke up facing the eastern forest, and upon reflection, there were only high-ranking monsters there. Yuri reveals that, speaking of which, he had defeated a cockatrice yesterday, but the girl laughs, taking it as a bad joke. The two arrive at their destination, and Arnett reveals that this was the field of medicinal herbs. However, Aizawa notices that there were no medicinal herbs there, which leaves Arnett confused. Yuri concludes that it seems someone had already gathered the herbs, and irritated, the girl responds that she thought they would be the first to arrive there. Suddenly, a man named Zach, along with his group, appears telling the newcomers that this was bad luck as they had just gathered all the herbs around there. Phil asks who they were, with Zach explaining that he was their veteran and therefore the two could relax, and Yuri remembers that these guys were at the guild reception the other day. Zach says he knows they were in the provisional license period and having gathered too many herbs, he would share some. Phil, upon hearing this, gets excited, questioning if it was serious, and Zach promptly replies that adventurers should help each other. Crying, the girl states that she can't believe she met such kind adventurers, and for that reason she wouldn't forget it. Before the young girl could take the herbs from Zach's hand, the boy drops them on the ground, stepping on them afterward. Revealing his dark personality, the boy asserts that they would never do such a thing, calling Phil a loser afterward. Laughing, Zach comments that being an adventurer means gaining fame, even if it means stepping on others. And this was not a job for weaklings who can't do anything on their own, or for clueless kids who know nothing about the world. Therefore, he orders the boys to give up and return to their hometown. Yuri concludes that they really had bad intentions and then wonders if they were the ones who were watching him in the morning. Even so, he couldn't remember doing anything wrong to those guys, and irritated, Phil questions what was wrong with these people. Running, the girl warns Yuri that there was still time and they should search the forest to see if any herbs were left. The MC realizes that if he did nothing, he would just be waiting for his license to be revoked. However, searching for herbs with just him and Phil was not realistic at all. While thinking of a plan, for some reason, Lime jumps out of his pocket, revealing himself. The boy asks his pet what was wrong since he had already fed him, but Lime was agitated and for some reason he sends a synapse to Yuri's brain. Yuri seems to understand something, and at that moment he prepares to throw Lime while stating that he was counting on the monster. Aizawa throws the monster, and suddenly, the creature in the sky becomes extremely giant and soon after splits into several pieces, spreading throughout the forest. Confused seeing this, Phil questions what the hell was happening. Yuri, with a smug look, asserts that everything would be fine as long as they collected the herbs. All the pieces of Lime start gathering medicinal herbs, and after a while, it managed to collect a pile of them. Arnett, seeing this, is impressed and celebrates with joy. Aizawa congratulates Lime, commenting that he did a good job. The MC reports that with all this, the two could already return. However, Annette seems sad and says he can go to the guild. The girl explains that she felt like wandering in the forest a bit and would be back soon. Sometime later, in the middle of the forest, we see the girl commenting that Yuri was really amazing. While looking at the only piece of leaf she had managed to get, Phil mentions that compared to Yuri, she was a failure. Remembering what Zach had said earlier, the girl feels downcast. Irritated, she says that at this rate, she wouldn't be able to become like Yuri-san and therefore needed to do something with her own strength. Then Arnett starts jumping between the trees looking for something and wandering throughout the forest, determined to find what she wanted. After a while, the girl finally finds a field with various medicinal herbs and sets off to gather them while celebrating, as with this she could become an adventurer. Until in front of her, Phil hears a growl and sees that a white wolf had appeared. Seeing a rank E creature, the girl gets scared and wonders if she had gone too deep into the forest. Seeing the wolf advance, she prepares to draw her sword and then declares that she had to do something about it. However, fear begins to haunt her, as being a rank F adventurer, she didn't know if she could defeat a rank E wolf. At that moment, the girl starts to back away until she remembers Yuri saying that she was amazing. This fills the young girl with courage, asserting that she couldn't depend on others forever, as she was also an adventurer. Thus, taking a defensive stance, Phil comments that she would handle this on her own. The wolf then lunges to bite her, but the girl manages to block the attack with her sword. She is thrown backward, hitting a tree, but staying calm. Arnett thinks she would observe the enemy's movements closely. The wolf doesn't hesitate and once again charges, striking the tree she was leaning against. However, Phil had already jumped up, and from above, she goes to strike her enemy with her blade. The girl manages to hit the opponent squarely on the head, defeating him in the process. Seeing that she had indeed won, Arnett begins to celebrate, realizing that even she could succeed if she tried. However, several other creatures similar to that one appear behind Arnett, frightening the girl. The wolves surround the girl, who becomes very scared. Seeing the wolves heading in his direction, Phil can only close his eyes in fear. At that moment, the MC appears, scooping the girl into his arms and saving her. Upon seeing Yuri, the young girl gets emotional as the boy asks her to let him handle the rest. Our MC places the young girl on the ground and turns to face the wolves. Phil doesn't understand why he is there, and Yuri explains that if it weren't for the girl, he probably wouldn't have been able to get the medicinal herbs and owes it to her. Moreover, he has actually been following the girl all along, but she was moving with quite a bit of agility. He then mentions that her previous fight with the wolf was a good battle, which makes the girl blush. The wolves begin to roar at the two and charge once again to attack. Yuri remembers that yesterday at the inn, while drinking water, she had acquired water magic and is now going to test it. As he conjures the magic, the boy apologizes to the wolves for having to end this quickly. At that moment, he creates a massive water vortex that throws several wolves away. Even with the attack, some creatures remain standing, which irritates Yuri. Aizawa realizes that the magic could immobilize the monsters, but has low destructive power. Once again, the wolves try to attack him, but drawing his sword, the boy says he will attempt a small variation. Thus, he executes several strikes with his blade imbued with water magic. We see that this was an advanced water magic called Ice Sword. Even in the face of this, the wolves are not afraid, and Yuri strikes his sword on the ground, creating ice spikes that hit and pierce some of the monsters. Phil, seeing the creatures being defeated, says that this was amazing and expected of Yuri. But the girl notices that there are many wolves, and the more Yuri defeats, the more appear. The girl then informs her partner that wolves that move in packs usually follow the order of a leader, and so there should be some boss in that forest commanding the monsters. Azal understands what the girl means, as he basically just needed to defeat this boss for the pack to disperse. At that moment, the boy starts receiving various calls in his head from Lime, which confuses him. When he closes his eyes, he begins to see through Lime's eyes with his Tamara ability, allowing him to see his target. Upon detecting the location of the rank C silver wolf, our protagonist tells his pet that he did a good job. In the blink of an eye, Yuri rushes in one direction, defeating several wolves in his path. The boy uses his fire shot ability that follows a path, dodging various trees and heading towards the silver wolf. However, the creature manages to dodge, sensing Aizawa's presence. The boy understands that with so many obstacles, it wouldn't be easy to deal with the creature, so he would change his approach to something more aggressive. At that moment, the boy begins to conjure a gigantic fire magic that even scares Arnett. Aizawa orders Lime to get out of there now, and the little creature promptly does as commanded. The MC unleashes a colossal fire whirlwind towards his opponent, burning the forest in the process. The creature can't do anything and is hit by the magic, creating a huge cloud of smoke throughout the area. The poor wolf is charred in seconds, and Phil is very frightened. Arnett then screams, asking what that was, and upon hearing Yuri respond that he just used a common fire magic, she asserts that it didn't seem normal at all. Some magical stones drop from the rank C wolf. Arnett congratulates Yuri, saying it was great that he got all those items. However, she wants to know how just the two of them will carry that pile of medicinal herbs. Yuri thinks that carrying that just him and Arnett wouldn't be realistic, and it would be good to have a magic that could carry everything at once. At that moment, the system notifies that the boy has gained another ability. Elsewhere, we see Phil showing the guild receptionist the stone she had obtained. The receptionist is genuinely impressed seeing the magical stone, then questioning if Arnett really got that by defeating a wolf, and she confirms. The girl congratulates her and comments that it's difficult to defeat a Class E monster on your first mission, which makes Arnett feel proud. Thus, the girl says she now recognizes her as a formal rank F adventurer, which makes the girl very happy. Phil starts to celebrate and jump for joy, and Yuri responds that he is happy for her. The attendant then calls for Yuri, saying that now was his turn. Meanwhile, the receptionist notices that Aizawa is empty-handed, and he then asks her to wait. He explains that he was still going to retrieve what he had gathered, thus activating his spatial contraction magic, summoning all the herbs and items he had collected. Seeing that, the attendant is in shock, questioning where he had pulled all of this from. In her mind, Yuri thinks that spatial contraction magic allows for free manipulation of space, and he never thought he would be able to use such a convenient magic. Aizawa thinks that by acquiring other skills, he doesn't sleep as well, and perhaps this is related to the time he spent living in that world. All the analysts were impressed with the number of items he had brought. One of them notices a green stone, and upon analyzing it, sees that it was a wind magic stone. Seeing such a rare item, the analysts are confused, and the white-haired boy asks if the MC had defeated a silver wolf. The boy replies that yes, asking if there was a problem with that, which leaves everyone in the room surprised. They begin to leave, asking Yuri to wait a moment. Arnett tells her friend not to worry, as he will surely become an adventurer, which makes him feel a bit relieved. A long time passes, and Arnett says they are taking too long, until at that moment someone arrives. The white-haired analyst thanks Yuri for waiting and informs him that he will be promoted to rank B. Phil jumps for joy, commenting that this is amazing, and the analyst states that an adventurer like Yuri is very welcome in his guild. The man asserts that they will proceed to the official registration, but Yuri declines, commenting that he will continue as a rank F adventurer. This leaves everyone confused, and Arnett lets out a scream. Outside, Phil asks Aizawa if he is sure as this was a promotion opportunity. The boy replies that it seemed like a problem, and that's why he didn't accept. Arnett says that when your rank goes up, you are called to the guild more frequently, and he agrees while thinking that he didn't want to act the same way he did in his past life. Before Arnett could say anything more, Yuri declares that he wants to live freely at his own pace. In other words, from now on, they will work together as rank F companions, and Phil asserts that the boy is truly amazing. She mentions that the boy always stays true to himself and is very determined. Arnett comments that she managed to defeat one of the wolves, but couldn't do anything when surrounded by the pack, and she is not like Yuri. Yuri interrupts her, saying that the girl has things he doesn't have, and without her, he would never have passed the exam. Moreover, as he said earlier, the girl is truly amazing. This makes the girl very happy, asserting that she will work even harder to catch up to Yuri, and he simply asks her to do her best. We see that Zack was watching the two from behind and was still irritated by their presence. Suddenly, the boy turns around, asking the silhouette behind him if he was going to do the job. An unknown being wearing a clown mask replies that he certainly will. Seeing Arnett stretch, Yuri asks if the lady is tired, and she replies that yes, as the day has been exhausting. He then asks her to rest, and she agrees. Before leaving, Phil also asks Yuri to rest properly and not stay up too late. As she moves away, she bids farewell and thanks for everything that happened that day. The MC wonders what he should do until his stomach growls, making him realize he hadn't eaten anything today. Looking at a tavern, he concludes that since he managed to sell the items he obtained, he should have a decent meal. The tavern attendant welcomes the customer until he realizes who it is, which makes him question why the hell the boy was there. Aizawa realizes that this was the wolf he met in the forest, and the wolf gets irritated since Yuri didn't remember his name. As he sits down, Yuri asks what he was doing there, and the wolf reveals that he has retired from being an adventurer. While preparing food for the customer, he explains that he became afraid of dying, as his companions abandoned him, and there was no reason to continue. He then serves the special black spaghetti from Pancho, giving a huge explanation about the dish. While eating, Yuri praises him, commenting that Pancho is a good chef, and the wolf feels happy, responding that he was the cook of his old group. But changing the subject, he warns that he heard Yuri was an incredible adventurer, and in that tavern, several people were talking about the boy and everything he did in the adventurer exam. However, Pancho asks Yuri to be careful, as if he gets too full of himself, he will attract Zack's attention. Aizawa is confused but remembers that this was the same guy he and Arnett saw in the forest and questions if Pancho knew him. Pancho reveals that Zack was one of his former companions who abandoned him, and that guy was the type to push others for his own benefit. The wolf informs that recently Zack started hiring assassins to hunt newbies to increase the rewards of the missions. Yuri asks if the assassin looked like the one who was breaking into the tavern through the window. The unknown being with a clown mask tries to strike the MC, who manages to dodge. Then the masked figure introduces himself as the Great Metsu. Pancho recognizes that being as the human-killing clown and questions what the hell the guy was doing there. With his scythe, Metsu lunges to attack his enemy once again, and while blocking the blow, Yuri thinks he really doesn't know where he gained that person's grudge. After the block, Yuri's sword shatters, and realizing it was no longer useful, he starts just dodging the clown's strikes. The fight goes throughout the tavern, and while Metsu tries to hit him, Yuri merely dodges. The clown, full of himself, claims that Aizawa was weak because he was fleeing and he was the strongest. In his head, Yuri thinks that using fire magic would destroy the shop and he needs something to replace his weapon. Thus, Metsu tries to strike him and finish that fight until Yuri notices something on his back. He darts to the side, letting Metsu hit some bottles that were on a shelf, sending them flying. Our MC catches one of them in midair, imbuing it with magic and informing Pancho that he will borrow that. Yuri then strikes the assassin with that bottle, using the shockwave ability and causing him to crash to the ground. Metsu, with that single blow, falls defeated. Picking up what was left of his sword, Yuri thinks he should buy a new weapon, asking Pancho if the wolf knew any weapon shops around. The wolf, seeing part of his shop destroyed, is in shock, and Yuri quickly apologizes for making that mess. Outside, Zack watched everything, realizing that Pancho was still alive and getting irritated, running away from there afterward. Arriving in front of an establishment, Yuri comments that according to the information Pancho gave him, that is supposedly a well-known weapon shop. Inside, we see a knight complaining and asking the blacksmith what he was going to do about it, but the dwarf orders her to shut up and not criticize his work. Irritated, the redhead states that the sword she bought yesterday broke immediately and the dwarf shouldn't speak to her in that way after making such a weapon. Therefore, the young woman declares that she won't leave until she gets an answer, and fed up, Yuri questions if that was yet another problem appearing in his life. The blacksmith tries to say that he would compensate the girl for that, but she, annoyed, states that she wouldn't ask him to fix her sword, but instead wanted another weapon in exchange. Hugo replies that she couldn't buy a decent weapon in that town now, While they argue, the MC uses his ability to analyze the girl's sword. Thus, he declares that the blacksmith's skills are not the problem, and it seems that the material used is poor. Riko questions who he was, and Yugo, the dwarf, states that it seemed Yuri had a bit of an eye for that. The blacksmith explains that they used to use high-quality ores from the northern mines to make weapons, but now only low-quality ores were available. Because a vicious golem set up there and they're forced to do what they can with low-quality materials. However, if this continued, that shop wouldn't last much longer and maybe it was time to close it. Looking at some swords in a bucket, Yuri picks one up and places a bag of coins on the counter. The boy asks the blacksmith to let him buy that weapon, as he would use it to defeat the golem. Hugo is startled, and along with him, the knight Riko comments that she has never heard of anyone fighting a golem with a sword. Yuri replies that it all comes down to how you use the weapon, and after he defeats the golem, he will use the ore he got to make a new sword. Riko leaves the place with the boy, introducing herself and asking for his adventurer license just to be cautious. Aizawa agrees, showing what was requested. Upon seeing that the idiot was rank F, Riko wonders if he wanted to die, since that was the lowest classification. She explains that people even call the F-rank potato digger because you're always covered in dirt, and there was no way he could defeat a golem. Yuri, confused, asks why the girl is angry since even if he dies, it has nothing to do with her. Riko blushes, explaining that it's just that she doesn't feel good about someone dying for nothing and therefore she would accompany the boy, and with no choice he agrees. Sometime later, Riko declares that they have arrived and that this was the mine in the north. The two start walking towards the entrance until a rank D golem appears. Drawing a sledgehammer, Riko says that their enemy was already there and she would finish this quickly. She charges at the golem, asking Yuri to watch her movements closely. The golem doesn't stay still and tries to attack the girl, who dodges and climbs its arm. She uses this movement to jump over the golem and land a solid hit on the monster. The battle continues with her landing several attacks on the creature. Yuri, while watching her, thinks that the golem has a lot of power and durability, but it was quite slow. And what Riko was doing was circling and continuing to attack the monster from behind. After hitting the golem a lot, the girl returns to the front of Yuri, saying that this was nothing for someone like her. The girl explains that the weak point of golems is their backs, but before she could continue speaking, the monster hurls a rock covered in energy at the two. Riko can't react until our protagonist steps in front of her and breaks the boulder in half. Then he strikes the golem with several cuts, destroying it. Seeing this, Riko is shocked and confused. She questions how the hell the boy did that, and Yuri retorts that he just cut the golem. As he follows Yuri into the cave, Gran states that ignoring a golem's back and cutting it with a sword isn't normal. She also mentions that this time it only worked because Yuri got lucky until he said he understood now. At that moment, we see several stone golems gathered in front of the two adventurers. The boy, preparing himself, says that since Riko said he was lucky, he would try again with those guys. We see that just before this, Zach's group was watching all of this, and one of them couldn't believe that guy had really cut a golem. Zach gets angry, saying he wouldn't forgive Aizawa until a figure appears saying it seemed they had a problem. The masked assassin holds a crystal ball while Zach questions who the hell he was. Inside the cave, the MC was destroying several golems with his strikes. Riko couldn't believe what she was seeing, and after finishing off all the golems, Yuri mentions that he must have taken out most of his opponents. After collecting some iron ores, Aizawa thinks that with this, they shouldn't have problems making weapons. Looking at another bag with some non-elemental magical stones, he states that he would give that to Lime. Riko then asks who exactly Yuri was, receiving the answer that, as she could see, he was just a rank F adventurer. She asks him not to joke, and in her mind, Aizawa asserts that he wasn't joking as he really was someone of rank F. But suddenly a voice emerges saying that they couldn't believe Yuri defeated the golems alone. Zach, calling for Aizawa, states that the boy was very annoying. The MC is surprised, and Riko mentions that those guys didn't seem to be friends with Yuri. Aizawa thinks that these guys were after him and he couldn't involve Riko in this, so he asks Lime to take her to a safe place. Lime promptly obeys, enlarging his form and making Riko mount him, starting to take her away. Aizawa, leaving his miners aside, questions why Zach was so obsessed with him. The boy says he didn't remember doing anything for Zach to hate him, and the idiot just laughs. Furious, the young man reveals that no matter how many times he tries to crush Yuri, he simply keeps acting as if nothing happened. The jerk says that now Aizawa even stepped into his territory, and that Yuri was a terrible person. Then, while ordering his companions to advance, he states that he would crush the boy. The MC easily knocks out all three who come at him. They seem to faint for a second, but like monsters, they all recover and advance, grabbing Yuri. Yuri is scared, as in his mind he had knocked them all out, until he realizes that his opponents were under a status effect called Berserk. He sees that this was also affecting Zach. After charging his magic, Zach declares that this was the end, unleashing a gust of wind towards his enemy. The MC thinks he couldn't move and taking that hit directly would be bad. The attack hits something and creates a cloud of smoke, and Zach believes he has won until he sees that Aizawa has moved. We see the boy conjuring a wind magic while the system informs that he has acquired new spells. Yuri then launches it against his opponents, sending all of them flying upwards with a powerful blow. Zack's entire group is thrown to the sides, and Yuri states that he learned a new spell just by watching someone execute it. He prepares to say that it was all over until he notices something, then questioning who that person was. Emerging from a black hole in the ground, the being controlling Zack reveals himself, surprised that Aizawa noticed his presence. The masked figure claims that Yuri exceeded his expectations, and it was a pleasure to meet him, which makes the MC suspicious. The masked man introduces himself as Nero Nightmare. Aizawa thinks that at the moment he used his magic, Nero protected himself with a wind barrier, and he was quite skilled. Nero congratulates Aizawa, saying he was impressive, and it was understandable that the weak ones before couldn't even scratch him. Therefore, he would give two choices to the boy, the first being to join them or die by his hands. The MC thinks he doesn't know why, but feels a strange sensation when looking at Nero, as that guy seemed familiar in some way. He then begins to remember some memories from his past life of people dressed in the same clothes that Nero was wearing. Aizawa recalls that when he was the Sword Saint, he suffered a lot because he joined an organization like Nero's. Yuri then asks Nightmare if he was one of the numbers, which leaves the boy scared. Nero states that no one outside his organization knows about the numbers, and therefore Aizawa must be one of them. He asks Yuri to show his hand, as if he is one of them. A number will appear on the back of his hand just like on his. Then Nero shows that the number 928 was written on the back of his hand. Yuri recognizes that and states that the members of this organization have numbers written on them, and the smaller the number, the greater the combat ability. Aizawa, while removing his gauntlet, wonders what his number was and if it would indeed be written on his reincarnated body. Upon seeing the number 0 written on the boy's hand, Nero cannot believe it. Nightmare states that this was impossible, as that number was permanently retired 500 years ago. Aizawa was also confused, as he knew that 1 was the strongest number, but he didn't understand what 0 meant. Nero questions if Yuri thought he could fool him with a fake number. Advancing towards his enemy, Nightmare states that as punishment for mocking him, he would kill Aizawa. With his immense speed, the masked man begins to circle around Yuri. Nightmare then asks what the young man thought of this and if he could keep up with his speed. Nero tries to attack him, and after easily dodging, Aizawa states that this guy was the fastest person he had ever encountered so far. Nero is confused about how this guy did that, and our MC analyzes the weapon of that boy, realizing it was coated with poison and therefore he would keep his distance. The MC fires a fireball towards his enemy while thinking he needed to restrict his movements. Nero, after defending, questions if Yuri thought he would defeat him with such an attack, but he replies that he didn't need that. Then, Aizawa sends the Windblade attack that had camouflaged itself in the smoke cloud, and, while narrowly dodging, Nero thinks he let his guard down. Nightmare praises him for using that distraction, even stating that the MC was more formidable than he expected, not realizing that his feet were already frozen. The man becomes desperate for being immobilized, but before he could think about it, Yuri shoots a water vortex in his direction. With Nero almost completely frozen, Yuri begins to enchant his sword with various spells. Nero even tries to bargain, asking him to stop that, but in the blink of an eye, Yuri cuts him with his sword. Seeing his opponent completely frozen, Aizawa states that he didn't want to be chained and glued again, for in this life he had decided to be free. Back at the weapon shop, the dwarf Muga was shouting that he succeeded, and that was his best work so far. He brings a sword to the counter while the MC thanks him for it. Seeing the weapon's stats, the young man thinks that this should last for a while without breaking until something suddenly catches his attention. Yuri claims that Yugo had used many good materials, then questioning if he was sure about that. The dwarf, smiling, says it was no problem, as he could make weapons again thanks to Yuri, which makes him promptly thank him for his kindness. Leaving there, the MC thinks he can't believe the dwarf did so much for him just because he defeated a golem. Yuri also states that he finally got his new sword and gained a new skill, meaning everything was resolved. Suddenly, two familiar voices call out to Yuri, and we see Riko and Arnett wanting to talk to the MC. The two girls look at each other and seem confused by the situation. Arnett angrily questions if Yuri liked women with large planetary spheres, but Riko asserts that they didn't have that kind of relationship. Ignoring this, our protagonist simply walks away while thinking that being a rank F adventurer was starting to get funny. At the guild, the attendant asks what kind of mission Yuri was looking for, with him responding that he wanted something involving monster hunting and with a huge reward. He explains that he wanted this because he wanted to give Lime more of her favorite magic stones. The girl then informs him that, in that case, she'd have a perfect job for the boy, which was a goblin hunt. Aizawa promptly accepts, but the attendant explains that there was a condition for this mission, as if the adventurer was rank F, it would be necessary to form a group. Yuri states that he checked the recruitment board and saw that a group was in need of a participant for the goblin mission. Next to a fountain, the girl asks Lid to hurry up, and Akaguro mentions that just 3 should be enough for goblins. Yuri interrupts the 3's conversation, stating that he had seen the recruitment on the board and came over. Lid seems irritated to see a man, but responds that she was waiting for Yuri. Seeing the boy's equipment makes her satisfied, and she states that Yuri perfectly met the requirements. Lid asks the young man to show his license, and after receiving it, she begins to analyze it. Furious, the adventurer throws it back to Yuri, ordering the boy to leave and calling him rank F trash. The man then walks away with his two girls while stating that it was a waste of time and that they would do this just the three of them. Yuri wonders if he did something to offend them while thinking that forming a group is surprisingly difficult. He questions what he should do as he would like to take on the mission alone, but not meeting the requirements was a problem. Suddenly, Riko appears asking Yuri what the boy was doing. After hearing the whole story, she says she understands him and states that it was sad. Aizawa thanks her as if it weren't for the girl, he wouldn't have been able to accept that mission, and she thanks him back since she almost joined Lid's group. The girl comments that there were reports that the goblins from the northern forest had already been hunted, so they would go to an area that was about a 2-hour walk from there, to the west of the mountains. Yuri comments that it was a bit far, and Riko states that if they take too long, other adventurers might arrive first, and it would be good to have someone who could take them. Aizawa reveals that he had someone who could do that, and then states that he was counting on Lime until the monster starts to shine. Then he transforms into his cockatrice form, which leaves Riko astonished. While flying with the MC on top of Lime, she wonders what that was. Yuri states that they were using a vehicle and that it was normal, but Riko says it was nothing common, and after a while, the two arrive in the highlands of the west. Aizawa thanks Lime, and Riko questions how he could stay so calm after moving at such speed. Looking to the side and seeing a lake, Riko comments that the view was wonderful, and Yuri replies that it was a peaceful place. The girl begins to interact with the lake, saying that the water was very clear. The MC, on the other hand, notices something coming in Riko's direction. When an arrow was about to hit the girl, Yuri stops it in midair. Riko apologizes while Yuri thinks that the goblins were using a tactic to surround adventurers and attack when they were relaxed. Analyzing all the goblins in the trees, Yuri realizes there were more than 20, and all of them had bows and arrows. Several arrows are shot in Yuri's direction, which he deflects with his sword. Riko starts to sweat while thinking that Yuri was really amazing. Some goblins reveal themselves and begin to walk towards Yuri. With his sword, the boy claims he will finish this now, until Riko asks him to wait a bit. Drawing her sword, the girl questions if she could do it with her own hands. After all, she was a true adventurer and should fight in a way that wouldn't shame her warrior name. Riko advances towards the goblins. As she stabs them with her sword, the girl asserts that she won't be a burden like she was in the mine. She then continues to fight bravely against her enemies, and seeing this, Aizawa thinks that the girl was truly an incredible adventurer. But even so, there were many enemies, and while invoking a spell, Yuri asks her to stay on the front lines. The girl is enveloped in a blue aura and begins to feel stronger. With her body feeling lighter, the girl starts to tear through various goblins, hardly believing what she was doing. Even with Riko confused, Yuri simply asks her to take care of the enemies on the ground, and at that moment he looks at some goblins in the trees. The creatures shoot at Yuri, who says he will handle the ones above, and then he casts magic with his sword, throwing the creatures far away. After finishing off all the monsters, Riko says she can't believe they managed to defeat so many goblins, just the two of them. However, she quickly questions what the hell Yuri had done to her body. Lime starts to absorb the dead monsters, and Yuri replies that he just enhanced Riko with magic, and that was quite normal. The girl promptly responds that this was not common, and staring at Aizawa, she asserts that the boy was truly different. Suddenly, something happens and Riko starts to fall, and seeing this, Yuri asks if she is okay. The warrior reports that she was hit during the fight, but it wasn't a deep cut. Yet the MC notices that the girl has a poison status. He explains that the goblins' weapons were coated in poison, and Riko states that those goblins were really smart, which was not common. Aizawa then asks if Lime could suck the poison out of Riko, and the monster jumps into the girl's wound, starting to heal her. With that, even Aizawa receives new spells, and Riko comments that she's feeling much better, thanking Lime for it. However, Aizawa asks the girl to wait, and at that moment, he begins to use the healing magic he had just acquired to ease Riko's pain. Seeing this, the young girl is even more impressed, asking where he learned such a rare magic. Yuri reveals that he had just obtained it, which irritates the girl, as holy magic was the rarest of all spells. But changing the subject, the girl asserts that they should find the goblin's nest, since with such intelligence, there must be a boss leading them. Riko claims she doubts the goblins would let them find the nest easily, but Yuri reveals that he knows the location. The boy explains that he saw some of them escape, so he put a piece of lime on them. At that moment, the little monster turns into an arrow and starts pointing in a direction. The two walk together through the forest until they reach the entrance of a cave. Yuri comments that Lime said this was the place, but Riko asks him to wait, since if this is the goblin's nest, there will be many more creatures than they have faced before. Yuri remembers that the goblin lord he faced also had many followers, and it was doubtful that the same magic he used last time would work now. Aizawa wonders if they should blow up the entire cave, but Riko says that then there would be no proof of their hunt. At that moment, Lid arrives with his group of boys, thanking Yuri for the guidance and calling him a potato digger of rank F. The redhead asks if Yuri knew those guys, but he replies that he doesn't, and Lid gets annoyed, saying that the two met at the fountain that morning. The MC remembers them and thinks he did see someone following them from behind, but he didn't imagine it would be those people. Lid says that it wasn't bad for a potato digger, and even though he was of a higher rank than Aizawa, he still recognized that the boy was good. However, in an intimidating manner, Lid orders Yuri to turn back as there were many goblins ahead and he wouldn't stand a chance. Entering the cave, the adventurer declares that Aizawa should go back to do some weeding. Riko realizes that this was the party Yuri had mentioned, and once again she celebrates not having joined them. Also entering the nest, Riko comments that, as Lid said, there would be many enemies ahead, and for that reason, they should proceed with caution. The two companions of Lid continue to throw themselves at him, and the jerk asks them not to worry, as he was there. Yuri thinks they have come quite far and yet have not encountered any goblins, which was strange. That's why he wanted to know what was happening until suddenly a mysterious fog appears. Upon analyzing it, Yuri says this was the enemy's magic, and while Riko complains that he can't see anything, Lid asks her to stay calm, as he was there. The MC realizes there are more monsters than before, and they are trying to block his vision and launch a surprise attack. Yuri warns that they are coming, and several creatures charge at them, but the two manage to repel the attacks with their swords, destroying part of the monsters. Riko asserts that there are many of them, but they are just goblins, and Yuri realizes that their strategy is based on numbers and their attacks are simple and coordinated. However, he is feeling something strange and feeling confident. Lid states that, as he said, those guys are easy to deal with. Again, the two girls are impressed until a giant blue being appears in front of the jerk. Lid asks if that creature was also a goblin, then says that even though they are bigger, it would be easy to defeat them, and charges to strike. He tries to attack the enemy, however. His sword breaks in half, and the irritated creature grabs Lid's hair, kneeing him in the face right after. As he is thrown, the boy complains that his handsome face was hit until he falls to the ground. Frightened, Lid starts to run away while shouting for help, even passing by the two beautiful girls who were accompanying him. At that moment, one of the blue goblins grabs the two girls by the neck. The monster prepares to devour them, and the girls cry out for help. Quickly, Aizawa tears the monster's head off, turning around and asking if the young women are okay, which leaves them impressed. Yuri asks Riko to take care of those two, and at that moment, more elite goblins advance against the protag. Aizawa states that the previous goblins were not as big, and those gained power through berserk mode. Using a powerful wind magic, he claims he will finish this quickly, launching his opponents away and making them crash to the ground. Suddenly, an elite goblin shaman appears, telling Yuri that he is quite capable. Seeing that talking monster, Yuri assumes this is the boss there, and the shaman states that the boy is very cruel for killing innocent goblins. At that moment, he mentions that his brothers must be eager for revenge, and a dark magic begins to swirl around the lifeless bodies of the monsters. The purple magic surrounds Yuri, paralyzing him, and the shaman claims that these goblins are merely sacrifices to use his dark magic. Yuri realizes that besides being unable to move, his magical power is being drained, which is bad because his vision is becoming blurry. Riko is also affected by the magic, and the goblin shaman starts to laugh, saying that everything will end there. Yuri finally acquires that cursed magic, managing to disperse it from his body easily. This leaves the goblin scared until the MC begins to conjure the same magic on the elite goblin. While conjuring that strike, Yuri states that the same magic that was used against him will return to the shaman. At that moment, the spirits of all the goblins that were used by the shaman are launched against him, hitting him with the dark magic. The monster then begins to literally melt, turning into just a skeleton. Seeing this, Yuri comments that the shaman was the one the goblins hated the most. Sometime later, fishing near the sea, Yuri thinks that it is peaceful there. The boy remembers that in his first life when he lived in Japan, he'd never had this kind of free time. So perhaps this desire for freedom is due to the experiences of his past lives. Musil and Emily appeared, throwing themselves at Yuri and saying that after being saved, they noticed he was very charming. The MC remembers that when he was leaving the cave, Musil and Emily seemed in shock, but apparently they have recovered. Emily then asks if there is anything she could do to help, and the MC thinks they seem much friendlier compared to last time. Thus, he asks the girls to put the bait on the hook, and when they open the box next to him, they are startled by the number of worms. Immediately, the two run away in fear, leaving Yuri confused, wondering what happened. Turning to the front, he sees a whirlpool right where his cook was, realizing he caught something big. The young man begins to enchant his fishing rod with magic, and as he pulls it out, he manages to yank a huge shark monster from the water. The creature, with no escape, lunges at Yuri, who simply draws his sword and cuts it in half. After splitting the shark, he gains a fishing skill. Suddenly, Yuri hears a voice and wonders what was coming next, and while being splattered by the shark's blood, Armet questions what the hell that was. The young girl ends up slipping in a puddle made by the monster's ketchup, and Yuri asks what she was doing there. Phil retorts that he was the one who should be asking that, then asks Yuri to get ready as they should train. Arnett explains that adventurers must participate in guild training once a month or else their licenses will be revoked. Exala concludes that this is a problem and therefore agrees to go with the girl. Then she grabs his arm and starts dragging him. However, the girl slips once again in the shark's ketchup, and Yuri asserts that they should deal with that first. Sometime later, at the Adventurers Guild, the two head towards the training area. With those people around, Armet gets nervous, and seeing this, Yuri wonders what they would be forced to do there. Suddenly, a woman with purple hair comments that everyone has finally arrived. Aisha jumps to the ground, announcing that they would now begin training for Rank F adventurers. The other adventurers seem to recognize Aisha, and Yuri asks if she was well known, with Arnett looking surprised to hear that. Arnett explains that she was Aisha, the spiny ranked 10th in Class B and the youngest rank B adventurer of all time. Aisha, irritated, states that she was there today to train that damn rank, and it was her job to recycle that trash and turn it into something a little better. The other rank F adventurers feel offended, calling the girl a brat, and one even grabs her by the collar. The adventurer tells Aisha not to think too highly of herself just because she was a kid, but suddenly the man is thrown into the sky without being able to react. After that, Aisha says she didn't like to waste time and therefore would educate all of them of rank F through practical training. Then the young girl orders those trash to come to her, and several adventurers charge forward. However, stretching her arm like a whip, she knocks out all the adventurers in a few seconds, and then looks at them with disdain. Arnett, impressed, says that this was expected from someone of rank B, and Aisha catches Yuri and Arnett's attention. The girl states that Yuri quickly judged that fighting her was useless after assessing her strength, and because of that he showed he was quite promising. The boy thinks it wasn't quite like that, but before he could respond, Aisha declares that she liked him. Therefore, she would give the two a special fencing lesson, which leaves Yuri and Arnett confused. Now, in a forest, Arnett asks if Aisha was short since they were just standing around doing nothing, and she replies that was the correct answer. The girl comments that rank F adventurers are fools who think they are very strong just because they became adventurers, and her mission is to teach them the reality of their situation. In other words, Yuri and Phil were the two who acted differently, and thus she could objectively assess their abilities. Then she reaches a point in the forest and states that they should start there. Yuri questions what Aisha was planning to do in a place like that, with her asking him to just watch. The young girl asserts that she will show an example, thus drawing her sword and then making a cut in a gigantic tree. With that powerful attack, the tree crashes to the ground, which leaves Arnett scared. Stating that this was the power of someone of rank B, Aisha turns around and says that now it was her turn, which makes Arnett even more worried, saying there was no way to do that. The rank B adventurer comments that it was the same for everyone at the beginning, but the goal is to keep challenging oneself repeatedly. For the moment Arnett cuts that tree, she will have acquired the intermediate sword skill, so the girl accepts and steps forward. She strikes several blows against the trunk, but nothing happens. Now gathering his maximum power, Phil hits the pine tree, but ends up hurting his hands without managing to cut it. Aisha responds that it wasn't bad for a first attempt and declares that Yuri was next. Arnett urges Yuri to do his best, and he thinks this was a rare opportunity where he would take advantage of the advanced fencing he learned before. He approaches the tree, saying that although it was a weapon borrowed from someone else, he would make sure not to break it. He swings it slightly, but creates a gust of wind that not only splits a tree in half, but also destroys part of the ground. The boy celebrates for not having broken his sword this time, claiming he controlled his strength well until he looked back and saw something. Aisha was incredulous, not understanding what had just happened before her eyes, and Yuri replies that he only did what he was told, questioning if there was something strange. Sweating, she retorts that this was perfectly normal, with Arnett disagreeing, but Aisha even lies that she has destroyed an entire forest with a single blow before. Elsewhere, the girl declares that this would be the magic training, and that this rocky area was perfect for practicing. Irritated, she turns around questioning if Yuri had learned magic before, with him responding that not exactly. Seeing this, the conceited girl asserts that the boy was a beginner in magic, which makes him wonder why Aisha was so happy. Excited, the girl declares that she would show him an example since she was his senior. At that moment, the girl imbues her sword with fire magic, shooting it at the rocks and causing a huge explosion. Yuri seems unfazed, and Arnett comments that it was incredible. Aisha responds that for a rank B, this was common. Aizawa thinks it really was an amazing spell, and as expected from a rank B, the power was on another level. Aisha tells Yuri that he was next and that the key to using magic was imagination. Thinking about what the girl said, Yuri wonders if imagination was like this and creates a giant sword made of fire. Immediately, Yuri launches his attack that travels a path and hits a huge mountain, destroying part of it. Arnett and Aisha are surprised, and then they realize that the rocks from the mountain were raining down from the sky. The girls hug each other in fear, and Arnett asks Yuri what they should do. The boy uses his intermediate water magic to create an ice wall that protects his allies from the debris. After seeing all this, Aisha asks who exactly the boy was, and he calmly replies that he was just a rank F adventurer, which makes her faint. In the distance, two people were watching, and one of them comments that it was extraordinary swordsmanship and magic to be expected from someone who defeated number 928. The hooded figure asks number 230 if he could take him down, but the red demon replies that it was a stupid question. 230 asserts that it was clear, as someone like him would never lose to a mere human. In the tavern, the wolf asks if Aisha had become the training instructor for adventurers, and Yuri asks if he knew her. The young man reveals that he was once part of Aisha's group for a time, and that, even though she was difficult to deal with, she was really very strong. Pancho reports that she never got conceited and worked harder than anyone else to rise to rank B. He even mentions that now that she has rookies, she wants to act like a true veteran. Someone enters the tavern, and before Pancho could greet him, the red-haired man questions if anyone named Yuri Aizawa was there. Some customers seem to recognize that man, wondering why he was there. The MC introduces himself and asks if the stranger needed anything, but Pancho asks him to behave. The wolf explains that this was Rosas Biscotti, also known as Rosas the Iron Mass, and he was a rank adventurer. Rosas replies that he didn't care about such formalities, and Pancho retorts that he hadn't seen him in a long time. Sitting next to the MC, Rosas states that Yuri was exactly as Aisha said, very young and fearless. Then Biscotti says he would ask for a favor as he wanted Yuri's help for a rank mission to subjugate the evil dragon. Upon hearing that, Pancho is incredulous, and our MC seems confused. Pancho orders Rosas to stop joking, as even if Aizawa is strong, he was still a rank F adventurer. Rosas reveals that he was serious, and meeting Aizawa today proved that, as Yuri had power equivalent to a rank A. The wolf responds that he heard Yuri refuse the promotion to rank B, but calling him rank A would be an exaggeration. Yuri then asks what kind of monster this evil dragon was, and Rosas explains that it is a terrifying creature capable of destroying an entire nation in an instant. A few days ago, it suddenly appeared in the skies over the Western Highlands, and a special guild group was being formed to subjugate it. Rosas then questions if Yuri was willing to lend them some of his strength, until suddenly someone with giant ears opposes this. An elf declares that including such an unknown man in their group was madness. The girl tells Rosas that his judgment was incorrect, as seeking the help of an F-rank adventurer was a shame for someone of A rank. Yuri asks who the girl was, and she reveals that her name was Claude Dowell, and she was third place in the B rank. The black elf explains that she had heard of Yuri, and did not know what kind of dirty tricks the boy had used. However, she absolutely did not recognize his abilities, and someone of F rank could never join her group. Seeing that this girl was also on the mission, Aizawa responds that he had not yet agreed to participate in the subjugation, but Rosas asks Claude to stop this. The man states that rank was not everything for adventurers, and it was a bad habit of Claude to judge people based on appearances. The elf then says that if that was the case, she would test him here and now, asking the MC to play a game. Controlling a fork with magic, the girl claims it was nothing serious and just a bit of entertainment, and if he could return that fork she was about to throw, she would acknowledge his abilities. Clue states that if Yuri couldn't do this, she wouldn't allow him to join her group, even calling him a potato digger. As she stands up, Yuri thinks he doesn't understand why, but he wanted to try. The two adventurers face each other, and Claude prepares. Rosa seems irritated by this, but the elf simply states that she was now throwing the fork in the direction of the MC. With the fork in front of him, Yuri realizes she was fast, and that must be the power of third place in B rank, and only the strength of her magic was impressive. However, with a single finger, Yuri stops the fork, which leaves Claude quite startled. Yuri turns the fork towards Claude, asking if he could return the object. Aizawa flicks it, launching the fork that passes by Claude's head and hits the wall, creating a cloud of smoke. The incredulous elf thinks that if that had hit her, she would be dead, and the MC not only blocked her magic but sent it back. Rosa celebrates and states that it seems the final member had been decided. Biscotti says he was counting on him tomorrow, and even reluctantly, Yuri decides to ignore it, only apologizing to Pancho for destroying the tavern once again. Amid a dirt road, Rosas was driving a cart. The boy apologizes to his group but explains that this was the only small carriage he had managed to get. Yuri notices that Aisha was also part of that mission, and she responds that she was the one who recommended him, and today would show the difference between them. Clue, still reluctant, judges Aisha, saying that someone from 10th place in rank B shouldn't support an F rank. Aisha retorts that Clue was the one who started a game and still lost, which sparks a heated argument between the two. Yuri, seeing that there were 2 rank B and 1 rank A there, states that he was feeling disconnected and questions if it was right for him to come along. Interrupting the subject, Rosas asks if Yuri had a slime, and the boy responds that yes, as that was his companion. The knight praises him, saying that taming animals is a rare skill, but Clue responds that even taming a slime was completely useless. However, the creature jumps on Clue's shoulder, and as she starts asking it to get off, Yuri warns that Lime liked her. Aizawa notices something and immediately orders all his colleagues to get out of the cart, just as a fire attack hits the group. Everyone manages to escape, and Chloe asks if that was the evil dragon, but Rosas reveals that they were just common rank C dragons. The MC realizes that all of them were tamed by someone. Then Rosas declares that he and Aisha will take care of the right, ordering Yuri and Claude handle the left. Yuri warns that the enemies are in the air, and it would be better if someone distracted them from the front while Chloe uses her magic, but she tells him not to give her orders. Chloe says that Rosas might trust him, but she did not, and she would handle all those creatures alone, starting to conjure a spell after saying this. The elf fires her thorn cannon that begins to chase the dragons trying to evade. However, the girl declares that no one will be able to escape, and thus the magic hits part of the dragons, freezing them. The creatures crash to the ground, and Chloe says it was very easy, while Yuri thinks there really was no need for him to intervene. At that moment, Aisha declares that another enemy was approaching, and a rank B meteor dragon appears, and Chloe, seeing this, asks if this was the leader. Aizawa realizes that this creature is also tamed, and at that moment, Aisha asserts that they should finish this once and for all, preparing a spell alongside Chloe. The two unleash energy bolts at the wyvern, which counters with a fireball, managing to block both attacks. Aisha and Chloe are surprised, then Aizawa gives an order to Lime. The slime jumps into the air, swallowing the dragon's fireball and digesting it. Seeing this, Aisha and Chloe are impressed until someone leaps into the air using Lime as a boost. Roses charges towards the dragon with his enormous shield, stating that he would use Lime on loan. He strikes the massive dragon with his Iron Destroyer shield skill, causing the creature to begin to fall. After that, Roses declares he would leave the rest to Yuri, who starts to imbue his sword with magic. The MC unsheathes his blade, advancing forward and delivering a precise cut to the dragon, splitting it in half. Yuri congratulates Line, while Aisha lies, saying it wasn't that bad, and Clue responds that it was just luck. Roses says they now have another problem, as the horse had been injured. Aisha warns that they must reach their destination before sunset, but it was 2 hours away from there. Yuri thinks he can make Lime transform into a cockatrice, but there were too many people to carry. In that case, he approaches the horse, beginning to use his holy magic. Rosa's group is in shock, now riding towards their goal. Clue states she thought that magic was just a myth, and Aisha notes that the horse was faster. The boy explains that while healing the animal, he used enhancement magic to increase its strength. Rosa informs that when they pass those trees ahead, they will reach the highlands of the west. The group rides into the area until they notice that part of the forest was completely burned. Amidst that destruction, several monsters and animals have been burned, and Chloe and Aisha do not hold back their egos and start insulting those dead monsters. Roses ignores them and says that the magical energy is getting stronger and that monsters should be nearby, so everyone should stay alert. Clue retorts that the group had 1 rank A and 2 rank B, and no evil dragon would stand a chance against them. Until looking to the side, Yuri notices some dragon bones. Aisha questions if that was the evil dragon, and Chloe also asks if it died before they got there. But Yuri immediately realizes it was still alive. Roses orders everyone in his group to prepare, and at that moment, the rank A evil dragon rises. Everyone gets ready, and Roses declares that the creature was advancing, and at that moment, the dragon begins to roar, paralyzing everyone in the group. Yuri realizes that the dragon was using its roar to immobilize him and his group, and he's impressed by such an attack, while Roses questions what the hell that move was. Aizawa feels the pressure was intense, but not enough to completely paralyze him. Suddenly, someone appears at the top of the mountain claiming that, as he thought, the adventurers of this era are trash. Zark Patonov, the demon of number 230, comments that he never thought Yuri Aizawa would come to him on his own. Potonov tells Yuri not to get cocky just because he defeated Nero, as that guy was just a low number. Zark reveals that he is number 230 and Yuri is no match for him, ordering that the humans die, and at that moment, the evil dragon charges at them. Yuri recognizes that this guy was from the numbers and probably came there seeking revenge, and the dragon's attack finally seems to hit the group of adventurers. But suddenly, demonstrating that he could still move, Yuri manages with his sword to cut the wyvern's claws. Not satisfied, he leaps into the air, climbing the monster's arm and striking its head with more sword cuts. The powerful evil dragon falls to the ground in pieces. The entire group of Yuri is in shock, and Chloe continues to refuse to believe that the boy was strong until Zark congratulates him and asks if he was ready for round 2. At that moment, the evil dragon is surrounded by purple energy and quickly awakens, trying to attack Yuri again. While defending himself with the sword, Yuri realizes that the monster revived, and even after cutting the dragon's claws, they regenerate and move to attack. The creature manages to hit Yuri squarely, throwing him against the ground. After defending himself with the sword, the boy thinks that no matter how many times he attacks that creature, it regenerates, and at this rate, he would wear himself out. He realizes that the evil dragon was like an undead, and for that reason, the young man begins to use advanced holy magic against the monster. The creature starts to writhe, and Yuri tells himself that undead are weak against holy magic and his past life experiences have been useful. Suddenly, Zark appears behind him trying to strike, but Yuri manages to defend himself just in time. The demon comments that this was starting to get fun, telling Yuri that they would begin the final round. The young man starts throwing various punches at our protagonist, who is just trying to defend himself in every possible way. He then decides to counterattack, imbuing his sword with magic and launching an attack against Zark, who, even while defending, sustains a small injury. The demon claims that Aizawa was slow, and imbuing his arm with magic, he tries to strike the boy, who is caught off guard. Aizawa uses all his speed, managing to move behind his opponent just in time, and we see that Zark's strike was so powerful that it created a line of destruction. Yuri thinks that his opponent had high power, but being large made him slower than usual. However, Zark appears in front of him, questioning what was wrong. Zark asserts that Yuri wouldn't win just by dodging, and he tries once more to hit the boy, who escapes to the side. The demon launches several stones at high speed while telling Yuri that he has become soft after sleeping for 500 years. The man comments that calling Yuri a zero now was a joke, and the boy defends himself by spinning his sword. With a huge rock in his hand, Zark comments that he has been waiting for the day he could fight Yuri again, and for that reason, he asks the boy not to disappoint him. Thus, he throws the boulder at Yuri, who dodges backward and cuts the rock in half. As he lands on the ground, the MC thinks that he is right. Just being defensive wouldn't work, and it wasn't good to continue fighting only with his sword. In other words, he was going to use that, so the boy asked Lime to take everyone in the group to a safe place, and the creature obeys, jumping off his shoulder. Potonov charges at his opponent, saying that Yuri didn't have time to worry about his allies and that the only one he cared about was Yuri. The creature explains that since Yuri defeated him 500 years ago, he has been perfecting his sword and has now acquired that impenetrable body. Therefore, he asks how Yuri felt about being pushed to his limits by the opponent he had defeated. The MC, on the other hand, will start using various spells and enchantments, creating a huge flaming spear. Zark, frightened, states that Yuri shouldn't be able to use anything beyond fencing, but the MC simply apologizes, stating that he doesn't remember much from his old times. At that moment, he launches his powerful strike against his opponent, who can do nothing but try to defend himself. Zark becomes extremely worried about the magnitude of that power, even claiming that he couldn't stop it and being thrown far away by the blow. As he burns in the air, the creature says he couldn't believe he was losing to someone like Yuri again. Aizawa sheaths his sword, then his powerful strike explodes in the air, eradicating number 203. The boys' group, who is inside Lime, can't even believe it. Calmly, Aizawa thinks that apparently he was getting better at using magic than before. Roses congratulates the boy and explains that the evil dragon must have been enchanted with some ability, bringing it close to rank S in strength. Yuri still didn't know if he was really that strong, as in his mind he only managed to do this because by chance he knew holy magic. The neg replies that regarding that, it would be better if Yuri didn't let too many people know that he could use holy magic. Yuri questions why, and Rosas explains that holy magic is extremely rare and valuable in that world, and if the news leaked, the whole world could fight for Yuri. The boy says he understands while thinking that he was right, and it was better to keep this a secret. Yuri remembers that by the way he had taken something from the evil dragon when he knocked it down, summoning a huge magical stone, questioning how they would divide that. Rosas is surprised by the size of that magical stone and comments that he is shocked, as he has never seen such a giant and high-quality magical stone before. Then he asks Yuri to keep it. The prodigy inquires if Rosas is sure, and even Aisha and Chloe agree with this decision. Meanwhile, Rosas asks the boy to be careful with her, as depending on how that stone is used, it could disturb the balance of power. Returning to the city, the boy thinks that sacred magic and magical stones would bring him many problems, and in the end, he just wanted to live freely. The next day, at the inn, Yuri wakes up to Lime making some noises. He wonders if it was already morning until he sees in front of him a small girl with blue hair. Confused, the boy questions what the hell that was. The little girl with blue hair wakes up, and upon looking at Yuri, she throws herself into the boy's arms. The MC pauses for a second, asking the little girl if she was Lime, and the girl nods. Yuri wonders if this happened because he gave that magical stone from the evil dragon to Lime, since, as far as he remembers, there was no visible change immediately. Lime then tries to say good morning to Yuri, but ends up saying everything wrong, and the young man is impressed by what she said. At that moment, the girl gets up trying to walk on her feet, and Yuri asks her to stop as it was dangerous. But not listening, she tries to walk and falls to the ground. The boy thinks that Lime is not wrong to challenge herself, but he wasn't sure if it was good for Lime to become human. So he takes the little girl's hair, saying that she didn't need to try so hard to imitate them. He then tells her that the girl had her own unique charm, and upon hearing this, she becomes extremely happy, transforming into slime and landing on his shoulder. Yuri tells Lime that they would set off on a mission today, and the little creature celebrates. At the Adventurers Guild, the MC tries to look for a mission on the board. He notices that they are the same old missions, involving goblins or wolves, and he assumes that Lime was tired of eating the same thing every time, and doing these repeated missions was boring. But suddenly, an unknown person appears calling for Yuri. The young man starts to introduce himself awkwardly, saying that he was in 8th place in Class C and was known as a rare wandering monster hunter, and his name was Dutch. Dutch then introduces Lehman, who is his pet and a rank E rat. Yuri realizes that this guy was also a monster tamer, just like him and Lime. Dutch asks Aizawa if he was looking for a mission and questions if the boy wanted to work with him for today, but the boy replies that he doesn't. Still, Dutch insists, saying that you didn't need to hold back, even explaining that not all missions are on the board. In this way, Dutch reveals that there is something called personal missions. Yuri thinks that he didn't like being hired by others, but there were no good missions on the board, and for Lime's food, it might be worth accepting something different. Thus, he and Dutch come to a consensus, and Yuri informs that he would accept the proposal, making the young man happy. As the two ride in a cart through the forest, Dutch comments that he had imagined Aizawa was a novice. Yuri confirms and says that there is a lot he didn't know and would appreciate it if Dutch could teach him. Dutch agrees, saying that, as Yuri's veteran, he would give him some solid advice. As the first thing, he approaches Aizawa and questions why the boy made a contract with slime, which confuses the boy. Dutch explains that there are many types of slime, but normal blue slimes are among the weakest monsters and no one willingly hires one. The veteran continues asking Aizawa to follow his advice and find a stronger monster to hire, and if the boy wanted, he could even help him. Looking at his pet, Yuri rejects the idea, saying that it wasn't necessary as Lime seemed reliable to him and he was sure she would be a great help on today's adventure. Laughing, Dutch tells the boy not to be mistaken, since if he trusted a slime, he wasn't a monster tamer and would have to give up that title. Before Yuri could respond, a giant hawk appears, grabbing Dutch with his claws and lifting him into the air. The man starts screaming for help, then our protagonist makes Lime transform into a cockatrice and fly, rescuing Dutch. Not understanding the situation, Dutch begins to scream desperately until Lime puts him back in the cart. Still shaken, Dutch asks Aizawa what his problem was, since he had never heard of slimes transforming like that. Yuri reveals that for his pet, that was normal, but Dutch had said that blue slimes are common monsters. Dutch in shock replies that common monsters can't do things like that, and Yuri questions, by the way, where they were going. Dutch retorts that he had revealed it, but their destination was the Dragon's Veil, a place that tamers call a treasure. The goal is to capture a young dragon sleeping in the Dragon's Veil. The tamer begins to list some monsters like the kraken from the distant seas, the golden bird, or even a rainbow slime, of which there are only a few in the world. Dutch claims that having captured numerous rare monsters, he eventually became known as the wandering rare monster hunter. Yuri, impressed, says that this was to be expected from Dutch and is proud to be able to complete a mission with someone so amazing. Aizawa questions why the boy was still ranked C despite his achievements, and nervously he replies that truly amazing people are not always recognized. Dutch explains that the dragon is very fierce, but now, during mating season, its strength has diminished and they could sell the young dragon for a good price. The man reveals that while they were talking, they had finally arrived, and that was the Dragon's Veil. He reports that to find the dragon, they would have to cross that cliff, so he throws Lehman while stating that it was the mouse's turn. The mouse manages to reach the other side, tying the rope to a rock so that Dutch can pass, and so the boy does, thanking his pet. Yuri tells Lime that it was good teamwork, and that they couldn't fall behind either. Heizawa notices that the wind was getting stronger and transforming Lime into a cockatrice, and flying over him could be dangerous, so the young man has an idea. Finally, Dutch reaches the other side of the cliff and turns to call Yuri, but as he turns, he sees the boy using Lime as a parachute and taking advantage of the wind. The MC then lands softly, thanking Lime for that, and the tamer tells Yuri that Lime really was strange. But looking ahead, Dutch notices some rank dekobolds. Dutch recounts that resorting to brute force suddenly wouldn't be smart, even if that was a way to control those creatures. However, the boy asserts that a true tamer is one who can defeat monsters with friendly communication. Aizawa thinks he understands and that he gave a bit of jerky to Lime when he made it his pet. Drawing out a strange ball, Dutch declares that if he had special homemade dumplings, he could win over any monster, and Aizawa, seeing that, gets startled. Questioning if that was real food, Yuri mentions that if someone ingests that, they could easily get sick. Dutch throws it in the direction of the monsters, asking them to become his friends. However, the creatures smell the object and become angrier, charging at the adventurers. The tamer doesn't know what to do until our MC steps forward and defends against the attacks with his sword. Then, he stares down the monsters in a frightening manner, which scares the creatures. At that moment, he throws Lime in the direction of the kobolds and the little monster splits into three, heading towards the beasts. Lime sticks to their noses and starts talking to the monsters, who seem to respond. Then they and Aizawa exchange a chat. Aizawa explains to Dutch that apparently the kobolds were expelled from their home by the dragon and the creature was just beyond that cliff. Dutch can't react, so then he and Aizawa proceed with Lime protecting Dutch from everything possible. They reach their objective and, irritated, Dutch asks what the hell that was, as they had finally arrived at the dragon's lair, but the entrance was blocked. Laughing, he comments that he would have to use his trump card, biting his finger afterward and asking Yuri to pay attention as that was his secret weapon. The boy draws a blood symbol on the ground and suddenly a rank sea golem appears. The creature walks to the lair's door and tries to pull the stone away, but fails, and Dutch realizes that the monster didn't have enough power. Yuri asks Dutch to step back, and then the boy uses his sword, firing an energy beam that splits the rock in half. Dutch questions how a tamer could use a sword technique, as balancing skills like that wasn't normal, and wonders if Yuri was really rank F. The system notifies something, and Yuri understands that the reason he can acquire skills so easily is thanks to his memories of past lives. He thinks he was just an ordinary rank F adventurer living his third life, but he replies to Dutch that he was just a rank F adventurer. However, the boy doesn't accept that answer, as the things Yuri did were not common for someone of rank F. At that moment, some feminine footsteps begin to emerge from the dragon's cave. Placing his hand on his sword, Yuri warns that someone is coming, and Dutch tries to see who it is. Suddenly, Aisha appears, saying she won't let the dragon hunters pass and that she will take them down. However, the girl realizes it was Yuri, but unlike Aizawa, who feels relieved, Dutch is startled to recognize the girl. The MC asks why the girl is there, and she reveals that the guild sent her to protect the dragon from greedy adventurers blinded by gold. She explains that dragons have value throughout their bodies, and the guild imposed restrictions to prevent overhunting, which is why unauthorized dragon hunting is prohibited. She'd also blocked the entrance to keep suspicious adventurers out, but she didn't expect Yuri to show up and break through. Yuri responds that he came there to collect an egg, and Aisha reveals that she hasn't heard any report from the guild about this, but the girl notices something as she sees Dutch getting away. The young girl asks Aizawa if that old man convinced the girl to do this, explaining that there are suspicious dragon hunters like Dutch. Irritated, the man shows his license, stating that he is a legitimate adventurer, until Aisha recognizes him as Dutch the braggart. Yuri is confused, and Aisha explains that he is a troublemaker who reached rank C by lying about his heroic stories and exploiting clueless novice adventurers. Aizawa thinks that Dutch's heroic tales must have been impressive, so he asks if everything Dutch said was a lie. The old man kneels, apologizing for deceiving Yuri and revealing that he has turned over a new leaf, even asking the boy to believe him. Aisha tells the MC to forget that man, but Yuri reveals that Dutch taught him things he didn't know, and he doesn't think that person is bad. However, Aisha and Yuri notice something, and the girl tells Dutch that they will deal with that later, while Yuri draws his sword. Yuri tells himself that they are surrounded, as we see several adventurers hiding behind rocks, and he wonders if those are also suspicious dragon hunters. Aisha declares that she will let Yuri handle the left side, asking the young man not to use fire magic, as stirring things up will be a problem with the dragon. Aizawa comments that he would like to take them down one by one with his sword, but the terrain makes fighting difficult. Thinking of a better way to battle, the young man bites his thumb and draws blood, starting to drip it on the ground and saying he will leave the rest to them. The kobolds from before are summoned and charge forward, and Aisha, seeing the summoning magic, is frightened, and Dutch is too, as Yuri summons several creatures. At that moment, the kobolds begin to attack all the dragon-thieving adventurers and defeat them one by one. Yuri realizes he wasn't sure, but apparently those creatures were stronger than when he fought them before. Aisha, scared, comments that kobolds should be rank D, but those have the strength of rank B, and Dutch reveals that the tamer's power influences their contracted monsters. Then the two wonder how strong Aizawa is. The dragon hunters start to run, and one of them gives the order to evacuate until Aisha notices a familiar symbol on the back of one of them. Yuri asks what is wrong, but the girl simply replies that nothing is. Aisha reveals that the situation has changed and those guys will probably come back to attack the dragon again. That's why she's going to enter the cave, questioning if Yuri will help, and the young man agrees, with Dutch also accompanying them. Aisha tells Dutch to make sure not to anger the dragon, as a rank C adventurer wouldn't be able to handle it, and the man agrees. At that moment, the group goes deeper into the cave, encountering a majestic rank B white dragon. Seeing the dragon's eggs, Dutch declares that he has spotted his treasure, starting to run towards it. As he climbs, Dutch states that fleeing now would tarnish the name of a rare monster hunter, and that he will grab his treasure and get out of there. But suddenly, a strong presence haunts him, and upon facing the dragon, Dutch is terrified. The young man falls from the nest, and Yuri realizes that the dragon has a terrible bloodlust and that aura is the strongest he has felt since his reincarnation in this world. Dutch asks Aizawa to help him grab that egg and escape. Then our protagonist walks up to the front of the dragon, staring at the creature. He apologizes and tells Dutch that he cannot cooperate with him after everything, and Dutch asks if he is scared, since their treasure is right in front of him. Yuri reveals that he now understands that even for monsters, their children are more important than their own lives, and that is why taking the egg without permission was unacceptable. He turns around, apologizing to Dutch, and at that moment, the dragon returns to rest on its nest until suddenly, something hits it. The creature awakens furiously, leaving everyone in the group startled. Dutch wonders what that is, but quickly everyone in the group realizes they were dragon hunters. The three wretches charge to attack the dragon once more, with Aisha and Yuri preparing to protect it. Suddenly, another dragon hunter appears, telling Aisha that it had been a while since he last saw her. The young man claims that finding Aisha there must be fate, and she recognizes him as Anges. Anges tries to attack the girl with his sword, but she wraps his weapon with her whip. The hunter states that, knowing how strong Aisha's sense of justice is, the guild must have asked her to protect the dragon. However, this was very bad, as the young woman would be stopped by her former comrades and would fail in her mission. The man even claims that Aisha will have her rank revoked, but as he steps back, she comments that the only unlucky one there was him. Anges is confused by this statement until, at that moment, Yuri defeats all three idiots who were attacking the dragon. Seeing this, the hunter questions how the MC defeated his subordinates instantly, even wondering what was happening since he should only be a tamer. As he advances toward his enemy, Aizawa is struck by the dragon's wing. The MC shows he has defended himself, but the furious creature charges at him. Yuri, confused, asks what Anges had done to the dragon, and he reveals that he sprayed a monster stimulant, and while fleeing claims that the track should be crushed. Thus, the dragon uses its paw to try to hit Aizawa, apparently landing the blow and kicking up dust from the ground. Dutch and Aisha become worried while Anges celebrates until he looks back and sees that Yuri was calmly holding the beast's attack. Anges is startled to see that the crazy guy was holding back a dragon's attack with his bare hands. Aizawa begins to connect with the creature, asking if it could hear him and assuring it that everything was okay and there was nothing to fear. The dragon seems to calm down and stops attacking Yuri. Then he tells the creature that everything is fine. The system informs that the advanced taming skill has been acquired. While petting his new companion, Yuri thinks that the dragon was just afraid of him, and that the drug earlier had heightened that fear. Anges questions how an F rank managed to tame a dragon, and then the creature says something to Yuri, understanding that the being was filled with hatred for that hunter. Yuri replies that if that was the case, he would leave the rest of the monster, and at that moment the boy uses his magic to awaken the dragon's hidden power. Now surrounded by a golden aura, the creature charges at Anges, who is frightened. It grabs his enemy with its mouth, lifting him up and throwing Anges far from that cave. While Yuri talks to his new pet, asking if it was feeling well, Dutch is shocked that that guy managed to get a dragon as a servant. Aisha mentions that once again Yuri took everything for himself, also saying that she would ask the guild to reward him. He questions if the girl was right about that, and Aisha confirms, as Yuri saved the dragon and even punished Anges for her. The MC wonders if that was right, since Aisha seemed to know Anges, and she explains that they were both comrades in their rank C days. They used to compete to see who would advance to rank B first, and because of that, after she was promoted, Anges began to commit crimes and do wrong things. As a result, his license was revoked and he was expelled from the guild, and after saying this, she declares that Anges was an idiot. Aisha asks Yuri if he knew where the adventurers who fell into darkness end up. She explains that it is in the Sub-Guild, a dark organization that employed adventurers who had their licenses revoked and who committed crimes. The girl also says that Yuri is strong and kind, but sometimes it feels like she's looking at a newborn baby, as he is deceived by all kinds of people, and he knows nothing about the world, and his knowledge and mindset are still at the F rank level, and if the boy continues alone, he will end up like Anges. Aizawa thinks that this was a harsh criticism, but Aisha was right, as it has only been half a year since he reincarnated in that world. Aisha explains that there will be another training session next week and Yuri must participate, as she will help him train his mind. In the guild training, Aisha greets the fools and explains that today the Grand Aisha will train them all again, and the adventurers remain silent. The prickly one questions if everyone is ready as she is about to start, but Arnett interrupts, commenting that there are only 5 of them there and last time there were about 10. The girl then reveals that, in fact, those 5 were the only ones left. She informs that in just 1 month, 3 died and 2 voluntarily returned their badges, which leaves Arnett shocked. Feisha even comments that having half of the newbies survive for a month was actually good. Yuri, seeing how dangerous it was, comments that you can never let your guard down even after becoming an adventurer. The trainer explains that being an adventurer is not as easy as everyone thinks, and she orders all 5 of them to stay vigilant. Then the girl declares that they will begin, and today's training is garbage collection. In the city, we see the 5 adventurers collecting some trash, and 2 of them start to freak out, wondering why the hell they had to do this. In a flashback, Yuri remembers Aisha telling him that something critical was missing in the boy, and he should realize it through training. While quickly picking up trash, Yuri mentions that he doesn't intend to fall into evil as Aisha fears, but he doesn't know how to ensure that, and for now, he will just obey orders. Arnett says that Yuri is impressive, while the boy just thinks he never noticed before, but when you look closely, you see trash everywhere. At that moment, a child passing by with his mother asks her what that guy is doing, and Yuri quickly replies that he is just picking up trash. The boy questions why Aizawa was doing this, and he reveals that it was adventurer training, which excites the child. The child states that this is really cool and he will also help the adventurer. Then Arnett appears asking the boy if he wants to clean the city with them. Thus, the girl starts cleaning with the child, who is very excited. Yuri, seeing this, thinks that the more hands, the better, and he should finish this quickly. The people around are surprised by Yuri's speed, and everyone is impressed with him picking up trash. Suddenly, all the citizens feel inspired and start helping Yuri clean the city. Aizawa seems confused as out of nowhere people started gathering and Aisha appears saying that things are going well. Yuri comments that for some reason the townspeople started helping and all they did was pick up trash. Then Aisha reveals that it was about this, as Yuri's sincere actions touched the hearts of the people around him. She explains that Anges had a remarkable talent but chose the path of evil, and if you only think of your own gain and disregard others, you will pay the price. But if you act with sincerity and dedication, people will gather around you. And when you are about to stray from the path, your companions will bring you back. And she hoped you would understand this, and the boy seems to comprehend and agree, as he got this far as an adventurer thanks to the help of the people he met. The boy helping Arnett starts to go to a corner, saying that the trash-collecting adventurer is here to save the day, until he bumps into someone. A bully notices that it was an annoying brat who bumped into him, ordering the boy to watch where he's going. The bullies start mocking the boy, saying he was trying to imitate an adventurer and dreamed of being a rank F garbage collector. Moreover, he drops his cigarette on the ground while telling the child that he will pick up trash forever. Suddenly, Yuri appears there pointing at the cigarette and saying that the jerk dropped that. Yuri also says they should throw it in the trash, and the jerks come back questioning Aizawa if he wants to fight and what his problem is. The bald one states that they were giving the kid a lowly task to do and he should be grateful, as picking up trash is all a rank F knows how to do. The Mohawk guy charges at Yuri, calling the boy an Ibia and telling him to pick up the cigarette himself. Aizawa crouches down, dodges his opponent's attack, collects the cigarette using fire magic to light it again, and throws it in the face of that bully. To conclude the fight, he throws both idiots with wind magic towards the trash can. The MC says it was for those fools to learn from this and stop throwing trash on the ground, and they apologize. The child, seeing this with shining eyes, states that the adventurers were really cool. Night falls over the forest and time passes. In a dark cave, Anges asks someone to wait as he was going to try to take the dragon's heart, immediately pleading for this hooded figure to spare his life. The young man even claims he would kill that cursed adventurer Yuri Aizawa who crossed his path. The hooded figure says Anges didn't need to hand over the item as he would give the young man another chance. Thus, he snaps his fingers, asking Anges to make sure to kill Yuri. At that moment, the young man begins to undergo a demonic transformation, and seeing this, the hooded figure states he didn't think he would find Yuri so soon. Elsewhere, someone tells Yuri that they would like to ask something, and he questions Rosas about why the young man had called him there. Rosas then reveals that the request was about a rank and mission concerning the subjugation of the Ogre King. The man explains that a few days ago an ogre appeared in the village of Moron, terrorizing the villagers. He was much larger and more violent than a normal ogre, and an rank adventurer from the neighboring town went to subjugate him but ended up defeated. Rosas reveals that it was determined this would be a superior variant of ogre, the Ogre King, and normally he would go, but he was busy with other matters and could not attend. So it fell to Aizawa, and he had even reported this to the guild and received special permission, as the one who defeated the evil dragon was the best candidate to go. Yuri seems to hesitate, thinking he was getting involved in another complicated problem, but he agrees, thinking this would be Lime's next meal. In the middle of the forest, Yuri arrives at the village of Moron, commenting that it seemed to perfectly blend with nature. Suddenly, the boy notices someone there, recognizing Phil. Arnett asks why her partner is there, and he explains that he accepted a guild mission to subjugate the Ogre King, questioning back if she would participate as well. The girl replies no, and that, in fact, she just returned home, as the village of Moron is her hometown. Phil reveals that he could not accept that mission, but he would not just sit idly by while that happened in his hometown, and he wanted to do everything he could. The girl says that with Yuri there, she felt at ease, but suddenly some object flies towards him, hitting him. Seeing that he was hit by a strange object, Yuri wonders what it was, and Arnett seems to recognize who threw the thorn. At that moment, we see Arnett's grandmother, Hilda, saying that they didn't need a fragile outsider like Aizawa there. Phil then asks his grandmother to stop that, and upon recognizing her, the girl questions what she was doing there and calls her inside. Climbing the stairs, Arnett comments to Yuri that her family was not exactly ordinary, and so the boy should prepare himself. Already in the residence, Hilda apologizes for earlier, commenting that Yuri was impressive for defending himself from her thorn. The grandmother asks Yuri if he was Phil's boyfriend, and the girl panics, trying to deny it. Yuri feels offended, thinking he was not a good person, but Phil responds that he was indeed, and Hilda just laughs, saying she had already imagined that. Changing the subject, the grandmother explains that she can guess why she returned to the village, since Arnett probably saw the mission she sent. Hilda states that, even if it is for the village, it is impossible for Phil to complete that. The young woman tries to deny it, but her grandmother responds that she knew about the legend of the Oni god, and hearing this, Yuri becomes confused. The old woman explains that 3 years ago, an ogre suddenly appeared near the village, and many adventurers challenged him, but none had a chance. However, the ogre never attacked the village, as they called him the Oni god and chose the path of coexistence, as sending inexperienced adventurers would only irritate him. This would make things worse, and that's why Phil shouldn't do anything reckless. Phil responds that it was fine, as that mission was being taken care of by Yuri. The old woman stands up, stating that she noticed Yuri's behavior was different from that of an ordinary man, and that was expected from the person her granddaughter chose. However, she could not let him pass just like that and would prepare a challenge for the boy. At sunset, they were to bring 10 kuni horns, and she would recognize the boy's strength and see how much Phil had grown. Sometime later, we see the two walking among the trees. Yuri then asks Phil who the child following them from behind was, and we see a half-wolf named Sam. Phil reveals that he was her younger brother, but Yuri responds that he didn't look like her. Then Arnett explains that her village is a bit special, as it was a place where children who lost their families in nearby towns gathered. Both Sam and she were abandoned in the forest, but Grandma took them in and raised them as her own children, and that's why she would do whatever she could for that village. Sam appears in front of Yuri, claiming he doesn't know how he got close to Phil, but he didn't accept him. The wolf also says that this was a task for his grandmother and that today he would evaluate Aizawa's strength. Arnett asks Sam not to be rude, but he complains and states that her taste in men was disappointing if she liked that sleepy guy. Phil takes Yuri's hand, leading him away and saying that Sam is wrong, and the wolf gets upset and jealous until the three notice something. Arnett asks if Yuri noticed, and he replies that yes, as they were surrounded by kumis. Sam, convinced, says that the creatures appeared, and he was excited to see how those weaklings fight, until Aisha and Yuri charge in, defeating several of those monsters. After all the enemies are defeated, Yuri turns to Sam, asking if he accepted him now. The wolf jumps to the ground, responding that this was to be expected, and that there would be many more strong enemies in the village until suddenly transformed Anges appears. The protagonist saves the boy using his ice magic to block Anges' attack. He throws Sam to Phil, asking the girl to take care of him and then saying that he would deal with that monster alone. Anju breaks the ice attack made by Yuri and starts calling the boy's name. He tries to attack the MC once more, who dodges while wondering how that devil knows his name. Aizawa manages to land an attack on the creature with his sword, cutting its shoulder and chest. Sam, seeing this, states that the boy was amazing. The wolf asks if the adventurers from the city are always strong, and Arnett replies that Yuri was simply special, and at that moment something happens to Anjas. Returning to a semi-human form, Anjas calls the MC's name once again, and the boy seems to recognize him. The monster then falls defeated to the ground. Seeing that someone had the ability to turn humans into ogres, Yuri wonders if someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Back in the village, seeing that her mission was completed, Hilda is in shock, saying she can't believe Aizawa really collected the horns. Sam also adds that Yuri had defeated a huge Oni, and the old woman says he looks exactly like her missing son. The woman explains that 30 years ago, her son was a rank A adventurer and a hero of that village, and he went to subjugate a terrifying monster and never returned. That's why she declares that she didn't want to lose another young man like Aizawa, asking him to promise that he would return alive. She then opens a scroll saying that he should go to the sanctuary after the road at the village limits, make an offering of food and loot, and thus the Oni god would appear. After doing everything that was instructed, and with Arnett dressed strangely, Yuri says they were ready. The MC asks if the girl really needed that outfit, and she replies that it was about the weather and that, while she was serving as bait, Yuri would defeat the Oni. Aizawa questions if Phil was sure about this, as it could be dangerous, but excited, she says that it may not seem like it, but she was confident in her ability to escape without problems. But suddenly, something scares them, and they start to hear tremors, and Yuri realizes it was coming. A colossal creature approaches with its club. The monster tries to attack the boys, breaking part of the forest in the process, but they escape. The rank A ogre king starts shouting, and Arnett gets scared, so Yuri asks Lime to take care of her. Lime inflates, serving as a carriage for the girl, and then jumps away, while Phil says that Yuri will definitely win. Yuri agrees, drawing his sword and enchanting it with magic. The two charge at each other, and Yuri's sword clashes with the monster's club. Due to the immense strength of the monster, Aizawa is thrown away but manages to land calmly on a tree and propel himself. He starts walking among the trees, heading towards the ogre, who notices the boy's presence once again. The MC stops on top of an object that the monster had thrown, and the ogre attacks him, shattering the object he was on. However, Yuri was already on the monster's back, using a skill and advancing against his opponent. He manages to strike with his blade, breaking the monster's left arm, which screams in pain. However, the creature quickly regenerates, and Yuri thinks that this monster was like the evil dragon from before. At that moment, the ogre begins to speak, saying he has finally met a powerful human, and Yuri is impressed by this ability to communicate. The ogre king pleads with Aizawa to end his life with his own hands, as he no longer wanted to hurt anyone. Yuri is confused. Then the ogre reveals that he was human, but was transformed into a monster and controlled by magic, and he did evil deeds to the adventurers who came to defeat him. For this reason, the ogre begs to be finished off before losing the last fragment of humanity he has, but suddenly he goes berserk and charges at Aizawa. Aizawa agrees, using his sword to sever the ogre's arm and launching himself into the sky. Then he states that he will fulfill the ogre's wish, advancing towards him and plunging his sword into his chest. Before falling, the ogre king thanks Yuri, calling him the strongest. As he turns back into a human, an earring falls from his ear. Yuri then realizes that the earring is very similar to the one Hilda wore, and perhaps that was the girl's son. Before he could think about it, a horned person appears, trying to attack Aizawa. The stranger states that to react immediately and avoid the attack on his vital point, Yuri was truly impressive. She then introduces herself as Gili Potonev, number 66, and informs that she was there to reward Yuri for taking care of her younger brother, Zark. Aizawa says he suspected the magic was similar, but now he understands why, since Zark was that girl's brother. The girl explains that the ogre king Yuri defeated was her greatest masterpiece, and there was a human who swore to fight for his village, and for that reason she transformed him into a monster. It was ironic that the one who was supposed to protect the village became a beast that attacked it. Charging a powerful black attack, Gilly states that Yuri has humiliated the numbers long enough, and this was their end. After creating a lance of black magic, she throws it while saying that now Aizawa will know the weight of his sins, but he just stands still. Yuri defends himself and realizes that this was cursed magic, and that it was charged with vengeful spirits of the humans Gilly transformed into ogres. After stopping the lance, the young man acquires advanced curse magic. Gilly, transforming into an abomination, says that this is what she expected and now wanted to see more of Aizawa's strength, as she would crush him at his maximum. After taking on an even more demonic form, she touches the ground and black smoke covers the entire area. Then, as she advances towards Yuri, she asks what it feels like not to be able to move, and Gilly even claims that in that darkness he could do nothing. But at that moment, the boy uses his reverse curse ability, blocking the girl's attack and tearing off her arm in the process. Even so, Gilly does not give up, jumping into the sky and charging a ball of energy, launching it at Aizawa and sending him to burn in the fires of hell. However, the MC retaliates with his advanced fire magic, which pierces through Jilly's magic and creates a massive explosion that spreads throughout the forest. Falling defeated, the demon cannot believe it, and Yuri appears in front of her with a cursed lance, saying that she murdered and toyed with innocent humans. Therefore, the one who should be judged was her, launching his attack next and punishing Gilly for all of her sins. Sometime after returning to the village, Hilda could not believe that Yuri had truly defeated the Oni god. She comments that Phil was right and that the boy was indeed extraordinary. Then Hilda asks Yuri to take care of Phil from now on, and seeing him agree, she feels embarrassed about it, creating an awkward moment between the two. Arnett asks Yuri if they could go, and at that moment the boy notices Hilda's earrings. He extends his hand and saying he has something to give to the grandmother. The young man explains that this was something the Ogre King dropped, and no matter where Hilda's son was, he was sure that the boy fought for that village. Upon recognizing the earring, the girl starts to cry and thanks Yuri, who soon leaves with Arnett. The girl expresses her gratitude for everything and for him not telling the truth to her grandmother. Then Yuri asks if Phil saw everything, and she replies that yes, she was watching the fight from afar with Lime. Yuri reveals that he lied because he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth as it seemed too cruel. Phil reveals that he likes gentle lies and that Yuri's lies saved her grandmother and her child. Moreover, there are lies that should be told and those that shouldn't, and Yuri simply responds that he hopes the girl is right. Then the two walk, showing they have become good friends. Yuri awakens in the middle of the ocean near some debris. Beside him, a feminine voice calls out saying it was good that he finally woke up. Aizawa thinks that looking at that face felt like he had seen it somewhere before, but he couldn't remember. The stranger says that with what little magical power remained, she was speaking directly from his heart. She asks him please to go to the city of Luminaria immediately. Before disappearing, she states that if he doesn't do this, the world will face destruction, which leaves the MC confused. The MC feels his breath tighten, making him realize that this was apparently not a dream until he blacks out. Back at the hotel, Aizawa wakes up with lime on his face, which makes him question what the creature was doing. The MC realizes that for a dream, it felt incredibly realistic, and if the world were destroyed, he wouldn't be able to live freely anymore, and that was a problem. The young man tells himself that he didn't want to, but he would check what this was about, and Lime agrees, so the two head to the guild. Inside, the MC tells the attendant that he wants to go to Luminaria, but the girl responds that due to an urgency, trips to that city were restricted. Yuri realizes that something was definitely happening, which makes him ask the girl if there was any way to get there, as if he didn't go, the world would be destroyed. Nervously, the young woman replies that in that case, there was a way, and for that reason, Yuri should accept that ultra-secret mission. The receptionist explains that she cannot disclose the details, but in response to a crisis, the government ordered the Order of Knights to launch an expedition to Luminaria. Some adventurers would also be going on the mission, and Yuri would have to participate in the rigorous test of the Order of Knights, and even hesitant, he understands that it was the only way to get there. Riko appears, commenting to Yuri that it had been a while and asking if he was okay. She inquires if he would accept the Luminaria mission, and upon receiving a yes, Riko says she would also apply, asking if she could accompany him. Yuri allows it, and Riko says that the Order of Knights brought back memories of the past, which leaves him and Lime confused. In a training field, Yuri asks if all those people were there to accept the mission, and Riko explains that it was because the reward was enormous. But she explains that the test of the Order of Knights would not be easy, and Yuri must focus, and he agrees. Suddenly, a girl with blonde hair appears, calling Riko big sister and hugging her. The unknown girl states that Riko looked even more beautiful than the last time she saw her, continuing to hug her, who seems startled. Yuri asks if Riko knew her, and she explains that the blonde is an old friend from her days in the Order of Knights, and her name was Clarice Apricot. Aizawa is confused, and Riko informs him that before going to that city, she was a member of the Order of Knights, and he responds that this explains a lot. Clarice seems irritated, asking her older sister who that man was. Then Riko introduces him as Yuri, a fellow adventurer who helped her a lot. The blonde replies that she wasn't jealous, but she didn't think a skinny guy like him was suitable to be by her older sister's side. However, Apricot states that he must have incredible skills, asking what his rank was, and Yuri responds that it was rank F. Clarice freaks out, questioning how a rank F adventurer dared to be beside Riko. Riko tries to explain that Yuri was amazing, but Clarice responds that she didn't know how he fooled her sister, but she refused to acknowledge his skills. The redhead apologizes to Yuri and says that Clarice has always been quick to jump to conclusions, but he responds that it was true he was rank F and he was fine with it. Suddenly, a knight appears calling for all adventurers and thanking them for gathering there today. The man introduces himself as Brian, the captain of the Order of Knights and responsible for that test. Brian informs that from now on, all of them will undergo a 2-day survival test, and only those who pass will be able to join the ultra-secret mission. Therefore, he asks everyone to follow the instructions of their designated knight and head to the Eastern Forest, wishing everyone good luck afterward. Yuri understands that this was the rigorous test Riko mentioned, and to reach the Luminaria he had to pass it, no matter what happened. Aizawa wonders who his designated knight was, and Clarice reveals that it was her, then disdainfully stating that he was disqualified. Now in the forest, Clarice continues to glare at Yuri in anger, which makes him uncomfortable. He questions why the blonde was staring at him so much, and she responds that it was a stupid question, calling him rank F once again. The girl reveals that this test also serves to evaluate the conduct of adventurers like him. Clarice asserts that Rico was not the problem, but Yuri was, and he had not been disqualified yet out of pity, but if she judged him unfit, she would fail him. Yuri replies that in that case, he'd approve himself, and at that moment, several silver wolves appear. The examiner comments that this was a perfect monster for tests, and Yuri, drawing his sword, says he had no choice but to prove his skill once again. Rico asks Aizawa to let her take the lead, then advances and strikes several wolves with her sword, eliminating them. Clarice is impressed, and as she turns to mock Yuri, she sees that he had also defeated 3 wolves in the blink of an eye with his blade. Rico congratulates Yuri, and upon seeing him do that with just 1 strike, Clarice is impressed, commenting that he certainly had power, but his swordsmanship was rough and reckless. The redhead defends him, stating that the essence of swordsmanship is whether you can defeat your enemy or not, and Yuri replies that the test has only just begun, asking Clarice to watch him. Near a river, Clarice declares that his survival requires the ability to secure food on his own, and at that moment, she shoots an arrow into the lake, catching a fish. The blonde asks Yuri to do the same and catch some fish, then suggests they have a competition, and if he wins, she will acknowledge his skills. Rico mentions that it won't be easy as Clarice's magical control is among the best in the order, and the young woman begins to shoot several arrows into the river, saying her sister was right. Yuri realizes that she was hitting the fish with remarkable accuracy, and if he used the same method, it would be hard to win, wondering how he would approach this. Until the system appears, saying he acquired an advanced, non-elemental magic. Clarice starts laughing while mocking, saying that Yuri wasn't strong enough until he questions if he didn't need to catch them one by one while invoking a strange magic. Suddenly, several fish begin to be sucked in by the magic, which leaves Rico and Clarice startled. Then our protagonist summons a portal in front of him, dumping all the fish he had caught. Aizawa states that he had caught many, which leaves Clarice shocked, and Rico asks if she now recognized him, receiving a no in response. Sometime later, she explains that the biggest challenge of survival was getting through the night, as monsters become more active after sunset. Clarice says that to get through, he must endure fatigue and fight while seeing in the dark, but since Yuri always seems sleepy, he should nap and let the monsters catch him. The MC thinks that it is true that staying on watch all night would be exhausting and needs more hands on the ground, summoning several kobolds around him. Aizawa gives orders for his monsters to watch the forest in shifts, and Clarice questions who the hell that person was, asking him to stop joking. While the boy wonders if he should have held back a bit, the blonde walks over to the campfire and states that this was pure fraud on his part. Rico says that Clarice simply isn't honest with herself, but deep down she's a good person. The MC then looks at Rico and asks why she decided to join the Order of Knights. Rico replies that it wasn't for any specific reason, as her family has been knights for generations, so it was natural for her to become one too. Yuri questions why the girl left the knights to become an adventurer, and she hesitates to answer, apologizing and saying she would go to sleep early to wake up well. Aizawa notices that she avoided the question, and Rico seemed a bit lonely, which makes him look at the campfire where Clarice was sitting. The boy explains that Wankichi, his monster, and the others are on watch and Clarice could rest, but she calls him ridiculous and says she was the supervisor there. Moreover, she comments that she doesn't fully trust his abilities and would protect herself, and Yuri thinks that gaining her trust would take some time. Then he sits down asking how she and Rico met, and the young woman suddenly feels uncomfortable with this question. But Aizawa reveals that Rico said he knew the blonde well, and that's why he was curious to know what their lives were like in the Order of Knights. The girl feels happy that Rico said this, deciding then to tell Yuri and affirming that this was a good opportunity to teach about her sister's kindness. While Rico slept, Clarice said she would tell a special story, a tale from her and her sister's time in the Order of Knights. Clarice explains that when she was young, she was attacked by monsters and lost her parents right before her eyes. The beast that tore her family apart came to finish her off. However, at that moment, the Knights of Luminaria saved her life, defeating the bear. As a child, she thought she wanted to become a knight who could also protect someone. After that, Clarice was taken to an orphanage where she dedicated herself to perfecting her sword skills and eventually was admitted to the Knight Academy. However, what she expected did not come true, and the reality was far from her dreams, as most who became knights were from rich and famous families. The rest were those who barely passed the rigorous entrance exams, the so-called shamegrew. Among them is someone from an orphanage. She was an especially unusual presence in the academy, and amidst the bullying from those jerks, Rico appeared and saved her. One of the jerks questions who she was, and Rico orders the scoundrel to be ashamed, stating that he was Rico Grands and his motto was to help the weak and destroy the strong. Clarice says that from that moment on, she decided to follow her older sister for the rest of her life, and she is the true knight, the one who stands by to protect everyone. Yuri states that he realized Rico had always been looking out for him and caring, and now he understood the reason for that. Clarice comments that this kindness is exactly what makes dark people like Yuri try to take advantage of her, but he responds that he wasn't doing that. The blonde mentions that no matter how strong he is, just swinging his sword recklessly and unleashing a powerful move won't make him a good fighter, since someone who cannot wield their sword correctly could not be recognized by her nor worthy of the Order of Knights. Aizawa thinks that wielding his sword correctly was something Aisha had said once and he was aware of it, but putting it into practice was harder than expected. Suddenly, 3 strangers appear and one of them starts laughing, saying he found a little knight. Claris asks if the stranger needed something, and the man states that unfortunately they were rejected and simply couldn't stand how blind the Order of Knights was. The stranger says they were government dogs acting arrogantly, and that's why it was time to teach a lesson. Creating an ice knife, the girl realizes that this was just a resentment from an idiot, stating that for him to be challenging her with a sword must take a lot of courage. The thug reveals that at no point did he say he would fight with a sword, and at that moment a venomous snake bites Claris. The girl defeats the monster, but the adventurer states that this was bad, as if a knight cannot move, there is nothing they can do. Claris calls that guy a coward, but he claims he doesn't care about such insults and would take revenge by breaking that idiot, then summoning a cyclops that appears shouting. The knight thinks that this was a tamer controlling rank B creatures and that was bad, but Yuri steps forward once again, summoning his kobolds. The adventurer questions what the hell Yuri wanted, and he replies that if the idiot had business with Claris, he would resolve it in the girl's place. The blonde asks the young man not to do that as it had nothing to do with him, and this was her fight. The tamer says that the MC has no place there and people like Claris keep acting as if they were high and powerful, but always end up regretting it. Since even a monster that would never obey anyone kneels before him, then the Cyclops tries to attack Yuri. However, the MC remains still, apparently taking the attack. We see that Aizawa had defended the club with his bare hands and he begins to analyze the monster. Yuri realizes that the Cyclops was being controlled by a magical curse and was forced to obey that guy, which must have made him suffer. The young man uses the reversal of the curse, saying that from now on the Cyclops was free to choose whatever he wanted. The creature awakens from the magical control, turning around and starting to scream at those who harmed him. He begins to chase the adventurers, and seeing this scene, Claris feels like she's back in her past when she was protected by Rico. Yuri turns to Claris asking if she was okay, and the blonde girl becomes emotional. Claris tries to act tough by getting up, but ends up feeling weak, and Yuri notices that the poison was spreading through her body. For that reason, he sends Lime, saying he was counting on the little monster, and then he starts to suck the poison out. Aizawa asks how Claris was feeling, and the girl responds that she felt incredibly well, even better than before. Yuri replies that this was good, and Claris asks why the boy saved her since she had dismissed his ability. The MC reveals that if something happened to Claris, Rico would be upset. Never neglecting others and always living honestly and seriously was what he learned in his adventurer training. Claris responds that she never thought she would be the one to receive a lesson, and it's frustrating, but Aizawa had passed the test and they should go together to save Luminria. After hearing everything that happened yesterday, Rico is surprised, saying she didn't expect them to get so close while she was sleeping, and Yuri is really amazing. They finally reach the edge of a cliff, and Aizawa asks if this was the meeting point. Mounted on a flying dragon, Claris calls for Rico and apologizes for keeping them waiting. After Claris lands, Yuri asks if they were going on that wyvern, and the girl confirms, as Luminria is a great nation beyond the Eastern Sea, and traveling by carriage would take time. The three then climb onto the majestic creature and begin heading towards Luminria. Sometime into the journey, Rico comments that no matter how many times she sees that view, she would be impressed. Yuri questions if they couldn't fly a bit faster, and Claris, irritated, says that this was impossible since that dragon is made for only 2 passengers. And if Yuri was complaining, he could jump and swim there, so she and Rico could continue alone. And he does as told, jumping off the wyvern. The 2 girls are startled until they realize something was coming their way, and a black rank B dragon appears. The monster scares Claris' wyvern, causing Rico to fall into the sea while the MC summons the dragon he had previously tamed. The white dragon appears, biting the neck of the other and saving Yuri and Rico from the fall. Aizawa jumps from his mount, charging at the black dragon and slicing its neck with his sword, while saying he was in a hurry and didn't want anything in his way. After that, he and Rico fly on the white dragon called the Sky Dragon, which leaves her once again impressed with Yuri's abilities. Claris wonders who that guy was, as even among the veteran Dragon Knight commanders, very few can command a Sky Dragon. Yuri then declares that they would speed up, and thus the white dragon takes off at high speed, and Rico comments that that creature was amazing. Claris feels jealous until the redhead realizes that she could now see the city of Luminria. Yuri notices that Luminria is a beautiful city by the sea, and for that reason, he wonders what could be happening in such a peaceful place. The residents of Luminria at the Dragon Port are startled to see that flying monster approaching. One of them asks if that creature belonged to Yuri. Upon receiving confirmation, the man states that he had never seen a sky dragon before. The young man apologizes and informs that the dragon was too big for one of their stables, and Yuri replies that it was fine, thanking his pet and making it disappear. Everyone is impressed, and Claris, feeling jealous, starts to get him out of there, saying they are there to complete a very secret mission and must avoid attention. She informs that Luminria was built with waterways that perfectly blend the city with the sea, and that's why it's called the City of Water. While the young woman explains more about the city, Yuri looks to the side, noticing the statue of someone familiar, and Riko questions what he is doing. Seeing him looking at the statue, she explains that it is the water priestess, Lady Aqua, and long ago it was said that she founded Luminaria and was the symbol of the city. Yuri finally realizes that the girl resembled the person he saw in the dream. 10 kilometers east of Luminaria, at Lake Elise, we see a cursed energy dome. A young man with horns asks the person in front of him if she is willing to tell everything she knows. Aqua merely questions what he was talking about, but the demon says he already knew she used magic to contact someone, and it was useless to pretend to be dumb. Holding the young woman's chin, Seriel comments that even if she does that, no one would save her. One of his subordinates appears, telling Lord Seriel that he has urgent news, as one of the black dragons patrolling the sea was taken down by an unknown force. Aqua immediately realizes that this was the work of Aizawa and that he had come, and Seriel understands who was to blame for this. Seriel informs his subordinate that he was no longer needed, thanking him for the report, but destroying the man and turning him into black energy. Aqua questions how he can do that to his own allies, and the Lord reveals that they are nothing more than sacrifices and fuel for his dark magic. At that moment, he envelops his hand with dark magic, launching it at Aqua and making the woman scream in pain. With Aqua unconscious, Seriel asserts that it doesn't matter who comes, he will erase them with his own hands, revealing that he was number 4. Elsewhere, Clarice declares that they have arrived and that this was the headquarters of the Knights of Luminaria, also known as the Silver Shield. As they explore the place, the girl states that their order is named after the Silver Guardians, who serve as a shield to protect the people. Yuri notices that it was more beautiful there than at the Adventurers Guild, and Clarice then thanks Lord Marius for waiting for them. Then we see a bearded mage congratulating the brave knights for being there. The man also tells Riko that it has been a while since he saw her and is happy to have her there, also congratulating Clarice for her good work. While the two are bowing before Marius, Yuri questions if that old man was really that amazing, and at that moment the girls start to argue with him. Clarice says he was a court mage and one of the strongest in the world, then asking Marius to forgive Yuri, but he replies that it was all right. Analyzing the MC, Marius sees that he had a flexible, strong, and unwavering aura, and seemed young, but his skill in both magic and sword must be formidable. It was as if he were in front of a legendary sword master and great mage, which is why the Lord questions what the name of the adventurer was, who soon introduces himself. The old man retorts that Yuri might be the person he has been searching for years, explaining that he sought strong individuals who are not bound by common sense. Aizawa thinks he didn't know how powerful a court mage was, but now that he was close to one, he could say that Marius was the strongest person he had ever met. The mage decides to skip the nonsense and says that Yuri would accompany his order of knights to investigate the singularity that was currently threatening the kingdom. He explains that the singularity refers to an area contaminated by powerful dark magic, and a few days ago one was detected 10 kilometers east of Luminaria. That area was declared forbidden, and they sent an investigation team from the order, but the team realized they could not handle it alone. Therefore, they sought adventurers willing to help with the investigation, and in this way he gives the order from the 3 to go to Lake Elise and help free Luminaria. Aizawa, thoughtful, realizes that this was what the saint was trying to tell him when she mentioned the destruction of the world. And if that was the case, he had no choice but to prevent it, telling Marius that he would handle the situation and asking the mage to leave it to him. The old man states that they will depart at dawn, so the group should take the opportunity to rest that night and prepare for the attack. At the hotel in the city of Luminaria, Yuri was lying down and he asks if his little pet was hungry, which makes his stomach start to growl. Aizawa realizes he hasn't eaten anything since morning, which reminds him of Riko saying they had some things to take care of and that he should stay there and not go out. However, now exploring the streets, Yuri comments that he just arrived in a new city and a stroll around wouldn't hurt anyone. He begins to explore all the places that catch his attention, admiring that beautiful view. Suddenly, Yuri sees Riko in a spot, and the girl, noticing the presence of the MC, questions what he was doing there. Aizawa explains that he and Lime felt hungry and therefore went out to find something to eat, questioning back what the girl was doing there. Before she could explain, Barry Blast appears calling for Riko, and the redhead seems to get irritated, asking Barry what he was looking for. The boy replies that he was just there for a stroll, even claiming that they got engaged and that her treating him this way made him sad. Riko asserts that Barry was still the same and that she ended the engagement a long time ago, so the guy should stop bringing it up, as persistent men are not attractive. Barry claims that Riko came back just to show off her new man, even saying that she would look much better as his woman than with a clueless guy. Barry puts his knife to her neck and says he will let Riko be his third wife, calling her a dishonored knight who became a defeated adventurer. Riko orders him to take back what he said, as she didn't mind being insulted, but she wouldn't let the boy disrespect Yuri. Pushing the girl against the wall, Barry says that she always acted with all the certainty in the world, and yet, every time she was defeated by him, and she knew better than anyone that she couldn't beat him. Ordering the redhead to recognize her place, Yuri, about to put his hand on his shoulder, states that Barry was the one who should know his place. However, he reacts by turning and trying to kick the MC in the head. Aizawa easily dodges and counters, hitting the jerk's supporting leg. As he was about to fall, Barry uses his hand to support himself on the ground and land, while realizing that Yuri was one of the adventurers who would join the mission tomorrow. He states that he will join as well and that it would be better if they got along while there was still time. Barry and Aizawa face each other, ready to start a battle. However, Barry turns around saying he was just joking, as he had no time to waste intimidating weaklings before a mission. But if Yuri gets in their way even a little tomorrow, he would kill the boy. Yuri questions if someone like that should be a knight, and Rico replies that even being a jerk, he was skilled. The MC realizes that he certainly seemed a bit frivolous, but those were quite refined moments. Rico remembers that Yuri had asked why she abandoned the knights, explaining that that guy was one of the reasons, and as he realized, Luminria was her hometown. Her father was a knight whom everyone respected, but when she was young, he died in battle. The girl says she hated being alone, so she went with the flow and became a knight, but her future and even who she would marry were things decided by other people. And living like that was suffocating. Her desire was to live freely, becoming an adventurer in the process, but she didn't know if that was right for her and if her father would approve. Yuri states that as long as Rico is happy now, that was all that mattered, and then saying that living freely is not a bad thing. Rico agrees that Yuri was right and states that tomorrow they will save Luminria. Sometime later, we see an army of people walking towards something. Marius says that for today he will count on Yuri, which surprises Rico. The mage declares that Yuri was the key to that operation and everyone was counting on him, which makes him think that the expectations on him have risen significantly. Barry, who was behind, states that he was surprised as he didn't think Yuri would be the ace of that team, and, as always, that old man's plans were beyond his competence. The idiot claims that without a doubt he was the ace and Yuri was just another knight, and at best, he could be a support. Rico gets irritated and Clarice asks Yuri to be careful, as despite how he acts, Barry was the strongest knight of the order. Clarice recounts that during the Great Suppression, when 100 knights disappeared, Mary was the only one who returned alive, and Yuri realizes that strength was what mattered there. Suddenly, some knights spot something, and in front of them, we see the singularity. Brian comments that that energy and haunted magical force were immense, and Barry passes by him asking the captain not to say he was scared now. The man, advancing towards the singularity, comments that there was no way they could retreat after coming this far. Heading towards the singularity, Barry orders all his men to advance. Brian mentions that Barry was acting recklessly just because he survived last time, but Marius comments that his boldness was raising everyone's morale. Rico tells Yuri that they should move, so the two enter the singularity. There they realize that there was a large purple energy that looked like a black hole. The redhead mentions that the atmosphere there was unsettling, and Yuri states that that land used to be fertile, but now it was completely barren. The knights notice some black goblins arriving, and the creatures begin to slaughter part of the order, which is startled by their strength. 3 of these creatures charge at Aizawa, who manages to slice them apart in an instant. Marius also proves to be powerful, creating a fire hurricane, destroying some creatures and ordering the rest of the group to finish off the remaining ones. Barry seems to feel jealous of Marius, saying that he is meddling where he wasn't invited, and at that moment more possessed creatures appear. One of the knights says that the monsters kept coming, and Yuri realizes that the number of monsters possessed by this magical force was high, and that was the effect of the singularity. A soldier says they couldn't continue like this and should retreat, but Barry grabs the boy by the neck, calling him useless and cowardly. Outraged, Barry throws the soldier away, saying that it was punishment for questioning him. Then the soldier rolls until he reaches an edge, and we see that there was a giant hole made by some enormous ants, and he was about to fall inside. However, Marius casts a round spell that saves the soldier and makes him float. The man thanks Marius for the help until, looking back, the old man sees Barry attacking him from behind and throwing him into the hole. Before falling, the mage questions what the hell Barry was doing, and seeing this, everyone around is in shock. Marius begins to fall towards a giant ant that had dug the hole, and seeing this scene, Barry bids farewell to the old man, saying he was no longer needed. The mage is apparently devoured by the ant, and while laughing like a madman, Barry says that even a court magician was eaten and he was useless now. Clarice shoots magic arrows at the boy while questioning if he had lost his mind, but the man merely defends himself from the attacks. Brian and Rico charge at the young man to prevent him from doing more madness until an explosion occurs. Suddenly, the monsters around begin to be absorbed by Barry, who unleashes a blast of black power that repels Rico and Brian. The two manage to land, and Rico, while looking at Barry taking on a demonic form, questions why he was like that. Barry, half-demon, comments that he could now feel the power surging through him. The madman says that a world that doesn't happen the way he wants is just trash. He flies into the sky with his black wings and begins to charge a spell while saying he decided to live freely without being obligated by anyone. Thus, the fool fires a ball of black energy that hits the ground and sends several knights flying. The black dust from the magic begins to spread, weakening and paralyzing a good part of the order. Barry questions why those humans are so weak, even claiming that just thinking he was one of them made him sick. Before the fool could say he would kill everyone, a green attack heads his way and he barely dodges, getting a cut on his cheek. Yuri, After firing the strike, says they would settle things from yesterday, and the demon, seeing who it came from, gets angry and summons his sword. The demon charges at Yuri while stating that he had warned him that if he got in his way, he would kill him. The MC draws his sword, easily blocking the idiot's strike, and seeing this, Barry asserts that if he just kept defending, he wouldn't win. Aizawa even tries to attack him. However, Barry jumps to his back. Immediately, Aizawa turns around, blocking the strike with his sword, and the two weapons clash, creating a strong explosion of energy that throws both of them away. Yuri questions why someone as skilled as Barry would betray the knights, and he replies that the knights are useless, and that he did it to prove his own strength. Barry reveals that he went through many troubles to kill the 100 knights of the Order, making him the only one who returned alive, and yet no one recognized him. He states that the only thing he seeks is strength and the power to take whatever he wants, and that's why he joined the numbers, being 86. The fool declares that that number is given only to the strongest chosen, and in this world the strongest reigned and was the freest of all. The demon even questions if Yuri didn't agree, as he could feel that they were alike, but he responds that Barry misunderstood the meaning of freedom. Yuri asserts that thinking being strong allows you to do whatever you want is an illusion, and ignoring others and living as you wish is not freedom. True freedom is living as you wish while respecting others. Then he appears in front of Barry, ready to attack him. Before his strike, Yuri states that this was the freedom he sought, and suddenly a blue attack is launched against the demon. Flying Barry says that Yuri was powerful, but questions whether he could reach him up there in the air. But looking ahead, he sees his enemy flying with wind magic. Before he could think about it, the MC attacks him, stabbing his sword into his chest and burying him in the ground. Completely defeated, Barry groans in pain, and at that moment, all the knights are free from the magic, and Rico, in his mind, thanks Yuri for freeing him from that guy. Aizawa thinks that the idiot wouldn't get up for a while, and for now, it was over until something happens with Barry. The man's body begins to inflate, and as this happens, the idiot screams desperately, begging for one more chance from someone. However, a demonic being orders Barry to be quiet, then explodes the man. Seriel appears where the knight's remains were, saying that the idiot should honor himself by becoming an offering for his black magic. Then the white-haired man shows that he knows Yuri, greeting him, who becomes suspicious. Seriel begins to emit black mana that frightens everyone there and causes them to faint from the immense power of that being. The demon prepares to speak with Yuri, but instead of calling him that, he corrects himself to number 0. Aizawa realizes that this being had very impressive magical power, and on top of that, knew him, so he inquires who this guy was. The demon apologizes for not introducing himself, but reveals that he was number 4, Seriel. Seriel says he is aware that Yuri was the one secretly exchanging telepathic messages with that person. The young man is confused, but number 4 says there is no need for him to pretend, starting to undo his purple magic. Aizawa notices that the magical energy around them has brightened, and that place was originally a lake, until a structure appears in front of him with someone chained. The girl seems to recognize Yuri, and the MC is startled to see her. Aizawa realizes that this person was the one appearing in his dreams, not to mention that he really felt as if he had known her before, but he couldn't remember. The girl tries to explain who she is, but at that moment Seriel activates a magic that makes her tremble in pain. The demon claims that he came in to rescue her, but arrived too late, as soon Aqua will fall into his hands, but suddenly Aizawa charges towards him. With his sword, Yuri aims to break Aqua's chain, but is interrupted by an unknown black magic. Seriel explains that this is a curse created from his black magic, and once captured, there is no way to escape. Aizawa tries to undo it with curse reversal, but even that cannot dissipate that power. He sees that he couldn't move, and Seriel comments that the old Yuri would have easily freed himself from such a simple restriction spell. Moreover, he didn't think the boy would end up like this, and it was even anticlimactic. But suddenly, a pillar of fire appears behind the demon. Marius shows he is alive and more muscular than ever and claims he will help Yuri. Yuri is surprised, then Marius charges at Seriel, saying he would make him pay for playing with the lives of his knights, and thus he launches a fire fist towards the demon. Number 4 easily dispels the magic, commenting that he didn't expect a mere human to dare intervene in his battle, but Marius appears in front of him. The old man tries to do something, but Seriel manages to immobilize him with a blow to the neck. Seriel declares that if Marius had trained like a demon for 100 years, he might have been strong enough to attempt a double-digit ranking. Before completely fainting, Marius declares that he leaves the rest to Yuri, and we see that he had freed himself with his spell reversal. Seriel once again calls for number 0 and comments that he distracted him and freed himself while weakening his cursed energy. Yuri then invokes his flame power, shooting at Seriel, who easily passes through it and calls the attack ridiculous. The demon then strikes Aizawa, who goes flying, and before he could recover, Seriel tries to attack him once more with his wings. Seriel asks Yuri to take this more seriously and questions what happened, since he was the one once called the strongest magical swordsman in history. The MC tries to counterattack, but Seriel strikes his sword, throwing it far away and calling him pathetic. The demon with his wings creates a black power that hits Yuri and drags him to the depths of that lake. Sinking, the MC thinks it was the first time that, even with his maximum strength, he saw no way to win until someone calls his name. Yuri wonders who is calling him until a projection of Aqua appears, asking him to remember that he was once the hero who saved the world. Aizawa asks who she was, and the girl says she was Aqua, a woman he traveled with, revealing that they fought against the rulers of the world and brought peace. Yuri then realizes that Aqua was one of the comrades who helped him defeat the Demon King when he was the Demon Emperor. Aqua touches her forehead to Yuri's, saying that even if the young man had forgotten his past, she would never forget her memories with him. Therefore, she asks the young man to believe in her, for if he regained his power, he would surely defeat Seriel. Then Yuri acquires a new ability, the hero's memory of ranked SSS. Seriel hovers over the lake and then heads towards where Aqua was. He tells Aqua that her hope was at the bottom of the lake and that her desperate struggle ended there. However, she denies it, saying that he would definitely return alive, and once again, Seriel uses his magic to inflict pain on the girl. Number 4 reveals that even if Aizawa is alive, it will only repeat, even saying that Aqua saw the previous battle and he's not even close to his level. Therefore, the demon declares that he would end this and that Aqua was very stubborn. Suddenly, something emerges from the water and Seriel turns, saying that no matter how many times Yuri tries, it would be the same until he passes by his side. With extreme speed and strength, Yuri manages to break the chains that were holding Aqua. Surrounded by a golden aura, the MC tells his friend that everything is fine and that he will end this quickly, and we see that the ability he gained triples his status. Seriel says he is satisfied, asking Yuri to show what he has, and once again, Aizawa appears behind him quickly. Number 4 even manages to defend against the blow, but the boy keeps insisting and tries to hit Seriel with his sword several times. The demon flies away, wondering what this was as something felt different, and once again, Yuri appears in front of him trying to attack with his flaming sword. This strike creates an explosion that even leaves Seriel worried, who begins to use his dark magic. Seriel creates several black blades around him, asking Yuri to become his sacrifice, and throwing the spears at the man. The MC manages to free himself from the dark magic without even moving, creating a huge fire dragon with his sword. He then charges towards Seriel, piercing the demon's chest, who is defeated. Seriel merely turns, saying Yuri's name and affirming that he was not bad and that this was expected. Before disappearing, number 4 declares that that sword technique is undoubtedly the power Yuri had before. However, the form he just defeated was merely a clone, and next time, Aizawa would have to defeat his true self, disappearing afterward. A red item falls from Seriel, and upon picking it up, Yuri realizes it was a talisman that creates a single clone of himself, but with only half the magical power. Seeing the item disappear, the MC thinks that even with all that power, Seriel is not fighting seriously, and that there were still strong people in that world. Aqua stands up calling for Yuri, and saying that she believed in the boy and knew he would come. The MC thinks he still doesn't understand, as he remembered she was his friend when he was the magical demon emperor. But Aqua was human and was not supposed to be alive in that era. However, upon analyzing her, he realizes she was of the spirit race. The priestess comments that it was not unexpected for Yuri to be confused, but she explains that humans with spiritual compatibility rarely reincarnate as spirits of the world, and she reincarnated as the water spirit of the 11th generation of that world. The MC thinks he used a magical reincarnation stone, but Aqua reincarnated under different circumstances. However, the girl asks him to set aside the joy of their reunion for now, as there was something she needed to tell. The girl explains that the numbers were starting to act for real and they are trying to misuse their power, spiritual beings. Aqua adds that the spirit race governs 5 types of magic that exist in that world: fire, water, wind, curse, and sacred. They regulate the distribution of magical power to humans and demons, maintaining the balance of the world. In the last few centuries, the numbers have increased in power, and they began to steal spiritual magic and modify humans, even using forbidden black magic. Aqua comments that she doesn't know their objective, but if all the spirits fall into their hands, the world will head towards destruction. Yuri understands everything and realizes that this was what his dream was about. Then Aqua reveals that she needed something, asking the young man to go to the fire priestess, Flare. Aqua explains that the next target of the numbers will be the fire priestess, and she knew this because when she was captured, Seriel ended up revealing this information. Yuri thinks he has heard Flare's name before somewhere, and maybe it's something similar that happened with Aqua. He must have some connection from his past with Flare. Aizawa retorts to Aqua that he decided to live freely for himself in this life as he got tired of being dragged into problematic matters. However, if anyone got in his way, he would crush them all with his strength, which leaves Aqua startled. She lets out a small laugh and says that Yuri has changed, as all this time he fought sacrificing himself for others, but now he was living for himself. Yuri thinks that in his past lives he was bound to various things and forced into a lifestyle full of suffering. In the first reincarnation, he was the demon emperor, and in the second, he joined the numbers and became the Saint of the Sword and tried to save the world from the shadows. But no matter how hard he tried, he was never rewarded for anything and was tired of carrying these burdens. Aqua warns that Yuri's partners would wake up, and before that, they should restore that place to its proper state. The woman begins to use her power, creating a blue energy and throwing it upwards. The energy hits the dome of the singularity, destroying it and freeing that place from demonic power. At that moment, everyone starts to awaken and Riko wonders where she was as she remembers being inside the singularity. Aqua then tells them that everything is fine, introducing herself as the water priestess and stating that it was a pleasure to meet them. Riko and her friend are startled, questioning why the water priestess was there, and Clarice even asks if it was her who resolved everything, but Aqua denies it. We see the MC carrying Marius and he states that the whole incident was resolved thanks to Yuri. Brian runs over asking if Marius was okay, and Aqua reveals that the dark agents were repelled by Yuri and she was also captured, but he saved her. The blue-haired girl then tells Aizawa that it was time to go and he asks why she was leaving already. Aqua reveals that it was because the numbers would pursue her again and until then, she should remain hidden. The young man replies that he understands and, in his mind, asserts that the objective of the numbers was to steal the power of the 5 great spirits. The priestess says that before leaving she had one last request, as she wanted the young man to turn his face slightly and close his eyes, and so he does. She then kisses Yuri's cheek, which leaves Riko and Clarice in shock. The girl retorts that as she thought Aizawa really had forgotten, and she reveals that they were once lovers in their past lives. Everyone around is surprised while the MC states that he didn't remember this. Shortly after, Yuri asks Riko if it was right for him not to stay in Luminaria, and the girl questions why he was asking about that. Showing signs of jealousy, Granz asserts that Yuri shouldn't worry, since Aqua must be much more important to him than she is. In his mind, Aizawa thinks that for his past self, yes, since Aqua was a precious friend. However, he replies that now Riko is the most important person to him, which makes the girl blush. The girl asks what that means, but Yuri simply replies that it means exactly what it looks like, which makes her even more emotional. However, in his mind, he thinks he has spent more time with Riko in this life than with Aqua, and naturally, if he had to choose, he would prioritize the redhead. And there is no deeper meaning than that, and Riko responds that it was unfair, but if he said so, she might take it seriously. Seeing her act strangely, Yuri questions if she is feeling unwell and needs a break, until the girl denies it. Yuri awakens in a place filled with fire and wonders where he is, even stating that he feels like something like this has happened before. Flare appears behind him calling for Yuri and saying that she wanted to see him. Once again, Aizawa thinks he has seen that face before, but just like with Aqua, he can't remember. The priestess pleads with Yuri to go to the capital of Fire, Neteria, as if this continues, the world will be destroyed. In his mind, Yuri thinks that the end of the world is involved again and that girl could be the fire priestess Aqua mentioned. Yuri's body begins to be engulfed by flames and he feels everything burning. He then awakens in his bed with all his kobolds sleeping on top of him, and Yuri asks why can she what the creature is doing. Aizawa thinks that the end of the world is about to happen once again and he needs to stop it, even if it's for his own freedom. The boy notes that things are getting messy sooner than expected, and even hesitantly, he decides to look for a mission that leads to the capital of Fire, Neteria. As he walks through the city streets, he sees a crowd of people and apparently some confusion happening. An unknown old man thanks all the customers for waiting, stating that the cheap weapon shop is open today, and so several people go inside. Yuri realizes that the weapon shop is very busy, and thinking about it, he hasn't maintained his sword in a long time. Suddenly, Arnett appears celebrating that she got the promotional item she wanted. Yuri questions what she is doing, and the girl, upon seeing him, reveals that the weapon shop is super cheap and has been attracting a lot of adventurers lately. She explains that the shop opened with very cheap items and the service is great, and the shopkeeper Kali is neat, and the shop's reputation has been excellent since its opening. Phil asks if Yuri doesn't want to check it out too, since they are also doing cheap maintenance for weapons. The MC thinks that the low price is tempting, but he would prefer to leave the maintenance of his sword to someone he knows, so he declines as he has a regular blacksmith he consults. Aizawa enters the shop, noticing that Yugo is arguing quite aggressively with a little girl. The girl says she is finished talking and he can do whatever he wants, and as she leaves, she bumps into Yuri, who asks if she is okay. We see that the one who did that was a little dwarf girl, and she replies that she is fine and then runs out of the shop. Aizawa asks Hugo what happened, and the dwarf replies that he arrived at a bad moment, informing that this is Tia, his granddaughter, and they fought because of the shop. Yuri inquires what happened, and Hugo reveals that, thanks to that new bargain weapon shop, their business is dead, and they can barely survive in the city neighborhoods. Hugo states that weapons are something the blacksmith puts his soul into one by one, and he would never accept this kind of business. The dwarf warns that they are back again, and suddenly 2 loan sharks enter, and one of them tells the old man that today is payday. Yuri asks who they are, and the old man reveals that they are some debt collectors. The dwarf responds to the hooded figure that he already said he would have the money next month and now they should leave, but the young man retorts that they have finished waiting. One of them says that if Hugo doesn't have the money, they will take his granddaughter in her place, since they have clients who would love a girl like her, and it could even make the shop more profitable. The big bald guy asks where the girl is, but Hugo replies that Tia has nothing to do with this. Irritated, he lunges to attack the dwarf. However, the MC uses his dimensional compression ability, making several gold coins rain down. Aizawa reveals that here is the payment for the girl and that they should leave now. The idiots immediately grab the money and run away. Hugo apologizes, since Yuri got himself into trouble and even paid for it, but he says it's no problem, as the dwarf has always helped him with his sword. The dwarf apologizes as he couldn't maintain Yuri's sword since he had taken a loan even with the business being tough, and at this rate, the shop won't survive. Moreover, his granddaughter says she wants to take over the shop and revitalize it, and she has the talent for it, and if anyone should sink with that ship, it should be him. He states that maybe it's time to give up, but Yuri replies that it's too early for that. The boy reveals that without the sword Hugo made, he wouldn't have survived all his adventures. Aizawa also declares that he still wants Ugo to make his swords, so to help rebuild that shop, he would lend his strength to the dwarf. Yuri was having lunch at Pancho's tavern, and after hearing Ugo's whole story, the dog seemed thoughtful. Pancho says he heard that this shop is trying to take advantage of having money to sell weapons at low prices, crushing its competitors and monopolizing the market. Furthermore, they are hiring dwarves who lost their jobs at the closed shops for a very low price, practically enslaving them. Aizawa then understands what's happening behind the scenes and comments to Pancho that he wants to help Yugo's shop, asking if there's any way to do that. Pancho says there is one, and that way is the ideal blacksmith competition, or as it's more commonly known, the SmithCon. The wolf explains that the SmithCon is a festival for blacksmiths, held every 4 years in the city, and everyone brings the best sword they've ever made to showcase their skills. Whoever wins has their name spread as the best blacksmith, and there's also a cash prize so they can pay off their debts and make investments. Yuri comments that he didn't imagine there was a way like that, stating that Pancho is amazing, which makes him start to brag. However, the wolf asks who would make the sword since, judging by the situation, they couldn't count on old Yugo. The MC agrees, thinking that Yugo has lost his spirit, and he could gather the materials, but he will need the help of someone who can forge a sword. Pancho asks if he has someone in mind, until upon thinking it over, the MC remembers there was someone. At that moment, we see Tia asking those lone sharks to let her go. The bald man tells her not to act like that, and the other one states that they have the perfect job for a cute girl like Tia. The girl denies it, commenting that she doesn't need that, as she's already found her spark as a blacksmith. The masked man asserts that Tia will earn a fortune just by working a little, saying that this way she could help her old grandfather and his little shop. Once again, she denies it, saying she would rebuild the shop with her blacksmithing skills, which makes the masked man angry. He orders her to stop complaining and do as she's told, and at that moment the MC, who was jumping between the houses, sees the situation. Heizawa jumps down, landing in front of Tia, then says he has business to settle with that girl and that they should leave. The lone shark comments that he told him not to get involved in these matters, stating that Aizawa has already interfered once, but this time will be different. Then he orders their brother to grab Yuri, and thus an extremely fat and giant man appears. The masked one says that his brother is a legend in the deck collection world and that he would crush a twig like Yuri in seconds. The man with a huge axe charges to attack Yuri, who manages to cut the handle of the weapon with his sword. Then he goes behind the giant, hitting his neck with an elbow and knocking him out. Everyone is in shock, and Yuri says he just knocked out the lone shark's friend and that they should grab him and get out of there immediately. Aizawa, with a frightening expression, orders them never to show their faces at Yugo's forge again, and the two then grab the big guy and run away. The MC turns to Tia, saying that she must be Yugo's granddaughter and asking if she's okay, and the girl replies that she is, thanking him for saving her. Aizawa then states that he needed to talk to her, as he had been looking for the young girl for a long time. Tia responds that, in fact, she is also looking for someone strong like Yuri, asking if the boy would join her at the SmithCon. The girl explains that she wanted to win by making the best sword for the competition, but first, she needed his help to collect ores from the Eastern Mine. She comments that to forge a high-quality sword, she needed rare ore from the Eastern Mine, but there are many dangerous monsters, so she needed a bodyguard. Furthermore, in that discussion they had, it was because Grandpa told her not to go as it was very dangerous. But she always loved her Grandpa's shop and always saw how dedicated he was, especially with the swords he made. That's why she decided she would win SmithCon no matter what, and she would rebuild the shop and protect her grandpa. Aizawa realizes that he and Tia thought the same thing, and that winning SmithCon also depends on the materials, as ore is necessary for weapon manufacturing. So he says he understands and agrees to lend his strength to the girl, who thanks him and introduces herself to Yuri, who reciprocates by doing the same. We see a one-eyed creature watching our protagonist and Tia. Thus, we go to Natiria, the capital of fire, and Seriel says it seems Aizawa was heading to a different mine and Flair's expectations were wrong. Seriel asks Flair what she and the spirits see in that man. Since Yuri only fought against a fragment of him and against his full power, he won't stand a chance. Flair says the demon was an idiot for not understanding at all, and that because of this foolishness, he would be defeated by Yuri. Mockingly, Seriel says if that's the case, he was looking forward to it. The jerk uses his dark magic on Flair while saying that with that complete version, he and Number Zero will finally see who truly deserves the title of real number. Being choked by the dark magic, Flair can only affirm that she believed in Yuri. In a forest, Tia says she was counting on Yuri and he agrees, but notices she was very tall for a dwarf. She reveals that her mother is a dwarf, but her father is human and therefore she is mixed, and nowadays pure-blooded dwarves like her grandpa are rare. Anyway, they arrived, and that was the Eastern Mine, and thus we see a huge structure. Yuri realizes that the vibe there was clearly different from the Northern Mine he went to with Rico, and the air felt a bit warm. Tia asks Yuri to stay alert since only high-rank adventurers are allowed in the mine, and hearing this, he reveals that he was not of high rank. The dwarf asks the MC not to be modest, revealing that dwarves trust their eyes for talent, and Yuri's abilities were immediately noticed by her yesterday. Thus, the dwarf declares that Aizawa was an A-rank adventurer, but he shows his ID revealing that he was F-rank. Inside the mine, she is incredulous as his skills surpass rank F, and Yuri says he declined a promotion to rank B because he prefers to live on his own terms. Tia declares that, in any case, they should walk carefully around there since they didn't know what awaited ahead, until Yuri notices something. Then he enters a mining cart, but Tia asks the boy to be more careful. She tries to pull him out, saying it could be a trap, but ends up stepping on the button that activates the cart and starts being dragged while holding Yuri's arm. The dwarf and Aizawa then start moving through the cave in the cart while she tries to hold on in every way so she doesn't fly off. Yuri says that maybe they would reach the deeper area of the cave quickly at this pace, and the adventure started well, but Tia responds that it was the worst start. Suddenly, a creature made of stone appears in front of the tracks, blocking the cart's path. Tia, upon seeing a stone golem, asserts that she knew this would be a trap. Then she asks Yuri to wait, as she would handle this alone. Yuri questions if she was sure since he was there to protect her, but the girl replies that she was. Tia says she just wanted him to conserve his strength for the boss of the cave, as even she could defeat a monster like this. She then jumps with her hammer, which activates a booster and hits the golem squarely, shattering it, and Tia asserts that if she wants her grandpa to recognize her, she would have. To earn it, the girl, after the attack, lands in front of Yuri, and he realizes that the explosion mechanism in the hammer increases her physical strength, and that's a cool fighting style. Mace warns that more golems were coming and starts attacking them while stating that the ore those guys leave spilling isn't that rare. Aizawa realizes that the girl could handle all of this alone and states that there is no need to intervene. However, a creature emerges and Tia says this one was a bit bigger. Then we see a large B-rank golem. A gigantic monster lunges to punch Tia, who has no reaction, but Yuri manages to catch the young girl in his arms and uses his fire magic to move to the side. She is happy to see her savior, and the boy comments that this was the end of the line. Then he kicks the cart a bit and uses the momentum to charge at the golem, slicing of the sword. Even while destroying parts of the creature, it does not yield and tries to counterattack with a punch. The golem seems to hit something and creates an explosion, and we see that Aizawa had stopped the blow with his hands using his hero memory ability. With just his hands, he uses his physical enhancement to throw the golem far away and then applies a buff to himself, gaining immense physical strength. After throwing the golem into the sky, Yuri jumps towards it to finish it off. He then, with a simple punch, pierces the large golem, shredding it apart, and the debris falls to the ground. Seeing this scene, Tia is happy, affirming that, just as she thought, her instincts were right even after everything. In Ugo's forge, we see the dwarf impressed to find a mithril ore on his counter. Startled, he questions if his granddaughter took that from the Eastern Mine, and she explains that yes, she went there with Yuri-san. Happy, Tia comments that she will use this ore to forge an incredible sword and win the blacksmith contest to restart that shop from scratch. Ugo, hearing this, seems sad, responding that it is too late for that now, as customers will not return to his shop. He says that no matter how good the sword they make is, it cannot surpass the cheap prices, and in the end, it was all a matter of money. Tia, irritated, retorts to her grandfather that if he doesn't make the weapon, she will forge the sword herself. The dwarf orders the girl not to be foolish, as mithril is the hardest material to work with, and even veteran blacksmiths struggle with it. And there was no way a blacksmith apprentice could handle it, but she responds that this is something she could only know if she tried. Desperate, the young girl asserts that she is Yugo's granddaughter and knows she can do what he does and will prove that this shop and his swords are genuine. She then takes the ore, heading towards the forge, and upon seeing this, the MC asks if Yugo is sure about this, which leaves the boy hesitant. The blacksmith reveals that she definitely has talent, but she is too young to handle mithril, and Tia is like an ore to him, since he dedicated his heart to shaping her, polishing her several times, and raising her to become a beautiful sword someday. Now, in the forge area, Yugo seems reluctant but agrees to make the sword with Tia, and at that moment, the two begin to work together to produce the weapon. Time passes, and our MC returns to the shop, surprised by the dwarf's worn-out face. Ugo comments that he fell asleep as he made adjustments to the sword all night, and Aizawa asks if the weapon is still not ready. However, the dwarf reveals that it is ready and that since it was his first time working with this material, the adjustments were complicated, but he managed. But upon opening the place where the sword should be, there is nothing, and seeing this, he panics, saying he left the weapon right there, and there was no reason for it to have disappeared. Lugo then realizes that there is a possibility the weapon was stolen, and suddenly the rival shopkeeper appears, saying he thought he heard something disturbing. The dwarf asks the jerk what he wants, and the man reveals that he heard Mugo would participate in the contest and came here just to support him. But it seems that his sword had disappeared, and that was unfortunate. Hearing this, the dwarf immediately realizes something, asking if this was the work of his rival, but sarcastically, the shopkeeper replies that he shouldn't accuse without proof. Yuri thinks that guy was definitely suspicious, but there was no way to presume he was guilty without evidence, and if only there was some way to confirm it. At that moment, the system appears, granting the MC magic that allows him to read the minds of nearby people. Then Yuri uses it, his eyes shining as he reads the mind of the shopkeeper, who was thinking that his subordinate had already taken the mithril sword, and it was too late. The idiot thinks he would completely break Ugo's spirit and leave him hopeless like trash, so that the dwarf would give up for good. Yuri realizes that guy was the culprit, and Ugo, at that moment, asks the shopkeeper not to play dumb, questioning him about the sword on his back. The young man comments that it is a weapon from his discount store and was the best weapon he could make, revealing that it was the demonic sword Durandal. Hugo is impressed to see a rank of sword, and the shopkeeper says he didn't show it earlier because Hugo had lost his greatest masterpiece and might take offense. The shopkeeper asks Hugo not to think about that, and then says he was making final adjustments for the contest and needed to leave, and Tia wakes up at that moment and goes to her grandfather. Yuri reveals that he was the subordinate of that jerk who stole the sword, and he was going to recover it with his own hands, but Lugo asks for a moment. The blacksmith states that even if he had the mithril sword, it wouldn't stand a chance against that demonic sword, and it's a total dead end. Aizawa seems to understand, and Yugo confirms that they would have to make an even better sword to win, and just as he was about to reveal the material he would use, Tia interrupts him. The girl then asks her grandfather where they could find that material, as she really wanted to resolve this situation, asking him to leave it in her hands. The MC agrees, stating that he would also help save that shop. Hugo says he figured those two would say that, and he thought he would sink alone on this ship, but he thinks things won't happen that way now. Then he states that they should get the magical sacred mineral, as with that they could forge a sword that surpasses anything. Yuri asks where they could find it, and Hugo explains that it would be in the fire city of Neteria, specifically in the Bustle Mine. Aizawa remembers everything that happened in his dreams with Flare, and he states that it seems things won't be easy this time either. Yuri and Tia were flying on the Sky Dragon, and she informs him that they were arriving. The two approach a valley, and Tia explains that this was the capital of Fire Neteria. After landing, they walk a bit through the city, and Tia comments that there was no one around and questions what the hell was happening. Aizawa notices someone approaching the stranger and saying that he needed to ask him something. The old man questions if Yuri had noticed just by looking, as this was not a good time and they should leave that city while they could. He explains that Neteria thrived thanks to its mining, but since the Bustle Mine was engulfed by darkness, the magic there began to diminish and no one approached anymore. In other words, Neteria was finished, and Tia mentions that without magic, the crops didn't grow properly, affecting all living beings, and that was what caused Neteria's ruin. Yuri thinks something similar happened in Luminara and tells Tia that they had a problem to solve before they could extract the sacred magical ore. The old man sees that the outsider plans to go to the mine, so he asks Yuri to give up for his own good, as that mine was no longer a place where humans could enter. Before leaving, he also mentions that the guild imposed restrictions, and Yuri understands that this was a problem, as there were no high-rank adventurers around. This makes Tia argue with him. However, suddenly, someone arrives saying that there was indeed a high-rank adventurer, and Chloe tells Aizawa that it had been a while since she saw him. Yuri recognizes that it was Chloe, who was part of the Rose Group, and they team up on the mission to subjugate the evil dragon. Tia asks why the girl was there, and she reveals that she came to join the mission investigating the black magical energy in the Bustle Mine. Chloe seems interested in what Yuri was talking about before she arrived, and he reveals that he was also there for the mine, as they wanted to collect his sacred ore. Yuri asks if they could accompany Chloe, and she mentions that regardless of the reason, his skill was remarkable, and if he was willing to help, it would be a great aid. Until suddenly, an elf appears saying he opposed this, and Masty Brawler, an adventurer, states that he couldn't allow unknown people in his group. Chloe asks Masty not to be like that, as Aizawa might be rank F, but he fights like someone of rank A or even rank S. However, the jerk states that there was no way a rank F could match him, and Yuri would only slow them down. Therefore, they should leave soon. Yuri says he had to go to the mine no matter what happened, proposing that if Masty recognized his strength, he would be forced to let them go together. The young man says that if he insists, he will accept, asking Aizawa to show his strength, and a little further away, the two stand face to face for a duel. Masty reveals that their duel will be held with an ice tower, since elves do not like bloody fights. So their duel would be to use magic to create ice towers and compete in quality, and that is a sacred form of duel. The young man declares that he will go first, touching the ground and creating ice spikes that grow and become a huge elegant pillar. Tia is impressed, and Chloe explains that Masty has one of the greatest magical powers among adventurers, and no one has ever defeated him in an ice tower duel. The elf says that, as he thought, the low mana here makes it difficult for him to use his maximum strength. Then telling Yuri that this was the power of a rank A, he asks if the boy could create a tower with that level of precision and detail, and Izawa says that seems difficult, which worries Tia and Chloe. Masti was about to declare victory, but Yuri asks everyone not to move, touching the ground and enveloping the entire area they were in with ice. The elf begins to feel the ground tremble, wondering if everything was turning to ice, which even destabilizes Tia and Chloe. Then, a huge pillar starts to lift the three of them up along with Yuri. Seeing the gigantic size of that tower, Masti can't believe it, and Yuri apologizes, stating that he wasn't very good with delicate things. The ice begins to move toward the mine, and while Tia enjoys this, Chloe comments that Aizawa always exceeded her expectations. Masti states that he had no choice but to accept, and being carried by the ice, the group heads toward their goal. Masti comments that it was strange for Aizawa to be ranked F despite having so much skill, and he more than meets the criteria to rank up. Yuri asks how to do that, and the elf explains that to increase your adventurer rank, you need to complete 4 missions of your current rank in 1 year. And that investigation is also a mission for Chloe to advance from rank B to rank A. The elf asserts that his friend truly has the skills to be a rank A adventurer, and he really wanted to promote her. Chloe explains that Masti is her senior in the Magical Research Society, and he was strict but reliable, and someone she respected. Yuri realizes that there is indeed a very large process behind rank advancement, but it's not like he had anything to do with it. Masti declares that they should wrap up the conversation as the bustle mine was right ahead of them, and Yuri notices that the atmosphere there felt exactly like that of a lantern. Tia comments that magic stinks, and Masti states that this was a singularity in its early stage, and that mission could even reach rank S. Masti tells Chloe that they could retreat, asking what the girl wanted to do, but she replies that they had come this far and fleeing was not an option. Yuri, determined, responds that it doesn't matter if that was a singularity, they will obtain a sacred magical ore, as that was the goal. The elf says that if that's the case, they should stay alert and move forward. Thus, the group enters the mine. Inside the bustle mine, a dark golem appears, but quickly Masti and Chloe use their fire and wind magic to try to neutralize it. Taking advantage of the enemy being distracted, Tia charges in with her hammer, landing a blow on the monster, which seems to have no effect. Masti explains that probably due to the dark magic, that golem had high resistance, and at that moment Yuri raises his hand. From the boy's palm, a green energy begins to head toward the golem, hitting it and creating an explosion that leaves everyone in shock. As he passes by his allies, Yuri states that holy magic works well against dark monsters. Therefore, the MC asks everyone to focus on keeping them occupied, as he would purify them. Masti, seeing that the boy uses holy magic as if it were nothing, asks Chloe who he is, but the girl replies that she was also shocked when she met him. Further ahead, the two elves join forces using a combined ice magic that paralyzes another of the golems, which is quickly finished off by Aizawa with his purification magic. The blonde tells Chloe that this was great coordination, and the girl agrees, warning that they should advance, but at that moment Tia says that everyone should stay alert. Desperate, a little girl declares that something there was stinking, and at that moment Chloe, Masti, and Yuri notice something. Above their heads, a pile of rocks was being drawn by a strange energy. From the sky, a creature plummets to the ground, and Yuri realizes that it was a master golem of darkness. The humanoid being advances towards Yuri, who barely defends himself, while Chloe and Masti try to freeze the monster but fail in the process as it was too fast. Yuri and the creature continue exchanging blows fervently for a long time, until our MC tries to use purification magic but ends up failing. The creature then lands a punch on the MC, slamming him against the ground. The monster grabs Yuri by the collar, throwing him away, while the boy thinks that even the medium-level holy magic wasn't working and his resistance was high. The system notifies that Aizawa had received high-level holy magic, and regaining his stance, he assumes this happened because he had used holy magic repeatedly. Placing his foot against the wall, the young man declares that he would experiment and then jumps up. Then the golem sees this, following him and also leaping into the air, and Yuri, at that moment, creates a spear of holy magic, driving it into the enemy's chest. Still in the sky, an explosion occurs, temporarily blinding everyone there. Seeing the flash, Chloe wonders what was happening, and Tia states that it was so bright she couldn't see anything. After the flash passes, Yuri appears in front of Tia, claiming he had taken the holy ore from the golem. Tia, seeing this, becomes extremely happy, saying that Yuri was amazing, and Masti comments to Chloe that he couldn't be more surprised by anything. Suddenly, the ground beneath the four gives way, and they begin to fall towards the abyss. The whole group starts plummeting towards the ground, and Chloe asks if that was magic. While falling, Chloe notices that the mist is getting thicker, and Masti explains that this must be because the origin of the singularity was closer. Tia then asks everyone to look, as she was seeing a light down below. After a while of falling, they pass through a hole into a place filled with fire. Seriel says he can't believe Yuri defeated his creation born from black magic so easily. The demon, now in his original form, tells number 0 that it was a pleasure to truly meet him, and the MC acknowledges him. Masti and Chloe are frightened by that being, and Yuri tells Lime that he was counting on a little monster. Lime then expands, saving all four from the impending fall, and without wasting time, Yuri jumps forward against his opponent, trying to strike him. The attacks of the two clash, and Yuri realizes that Serial's true power was on a completely different level compared to when they fought in Luminrea. Suddenly, Yuri hears a familiar voice calling him, and Flare, exhausted, looks at him, stating that she knew he would come. Once again, Aizawa thinks that just like Aqua, he felt he had met Flare somewhere before. The MC then has flashbacks of his conversations with Aqua and the danger Serial represents with the power of spirits, concluding that he urgently needed to rescue Flare. Serial suddenly appears behind the MC, stating that it wasn't the time for him to be distracted, and before he could do anything, some ice crystals emerged between the two opponents. Chloe and Massey were working together, stating that they would help Aizawa with everything he needed. Irritated, Serial calls those two noisy insects, and Tia thinks that this being was much stronger than any golem they had faced. But still, the three were holding their ground, and adventurers were truly amazing. Chloe creates an ice path leading to Serial, who was flying, and Yuri uses this to try to hit his opponent, who defends himself only with his bare hands. Even so, the MC unleashes a burst of energy with his sword that pushes Serial away. The demon declares that those adventurers were annoying, and that the combination of their abilities with Yuri was quite clever. But the man states that it was a shame and that he would raise the stakes a bit by using a purple ability that paralyzes Tia, Chloe, and Masty, throwing them afterward. In the air, looking at all those defeated beings, Serial questions why humans are so weak and fragile. Assuming a new form with 4 wings, the being says that if only they became noble demons like him, they could have eternal beauty and strength. Looking at the ground, Serial says that there was an exception, a monster who gave up being human, and that was Yuri. Only one remained. Awakening, the monster states that there will be no more interruptions and they will take this to the end, questioning if Aizawa could surpass him in his true form. Aizawa, using his past life abilities, asserts that no matter what happens, what he has to do will not change, and thus a golden aura envelops him. With a sword in one hand and magic in the other, the MC declares that anyone who stands in the way of his freedom will be crushed by him with everything he has. Serial smiles, summoning a black scythe and advancing towards Yuri, appearing right in front of the boy, who seems unfazed. The two opponents begin to exchange blows with extreme speed and power. Yuri dodges one of Serial's strikes, taking a bit of distance and launching a burst of energy with his sword towards him. Serial, on the other hand, spins his scythe, defending against the strike and then hurling it towards Yuri. The protagonist manages to jump over the weapon and rush towards Serial. The man demonstrates control over the object, making a return towards Yuri, who is forced to defend against multiple strikes with his sword. After taking several cuts from that weapon, the MC remains standing, but a bit more weakened. Mockingly, Serial asks what happened to all his previous confidence, as the boy was moving more and more slowly. Yuri uses his ability to analyze his opponent's weapon, seeing that the scythe absorbs the blood from the wounds it inflicts and grows stronger the more blood it absorbs. The demon advances once more and begins to exchange more blows with Yuri, who thinks that this fatigue is caused by blood loss. Aizawa realizes that at this pace, the speed difference would only increase, and that was bad. However, suddenly, an ability called Breath of the God of Wind is unleashed against Serial, forcing him to retreat from his opponent. Chloe and Masty, who were struggling to stay upright after casting that spell, urge Yuri not to lose, as he is not the type of man who falls like that. The demon, seeing that they were conscious, says that this would change nothing, as he would kill them all, then heading towards Masty and Chloe. Using his wind ability, Yuri appears in front of Serial, wielding his sword and stating that something had changed, even mocking his enemy. The two powerful beings then begin to face off in the air. The fight was fierce, with both using strong abilities and Serial almost hitting Yuri several times. The battle extends throughout that place, shaking even the lava. As he moves away, the MC thinks he could barely surpass Serial, and it was only a matter of time before he adapted, so he had to end this. At that moment, the boy creates a phoenix dragon with his flame abilities, launching it with his sword towards his enemy. Seeing that it was that ability that defeated his clone, the demon simply uses his power world of darkness, causing Yuri to sink into an indescribable void. Serial states that it was a shame, as he had already prepared something for Aizawa's ultimate ability, and in that void of darkness, the boy was powerless. Number 4 tells Number 0 that this time it's over and he has surpassed Yuri, and will rise even higher to stand beside that person. However, like the flame of a phoenix, something begins to shine at Aizawa. Suddenly, the young man eliminates all that darkness with flames that would burn even hell. Seeing Yuri covered in fire, the demon questions what the hell kind of form that was. Flare, after giving a small push to his ally, states that Serial was screwed, as Aizawa had said he would take him down. Irritated, the demon calls forth the spirits of the cursed, questioning how many times they would stay in his way, even claiming to be disappointed with Zero. The demon explains that Aizawa was once a solitary warrior, but now he needed the help of his supposed allies and could do nothing alone. With a ball of black magic in his hand, he advances against his opponent while saying that Yuri was a disgrace. He launches his magic at Aizawa while questioning if this was the freedom the boy sought, but Seriel's power does not affect Yuri at all. The boy asserts that he does not care what happens to the others as long as he has his freedom, but it is not that simple. For even though it is inconvenient, he would help others to be helped in return, as it seems that his true freedom is also with those people. At that moment, Aizawa envelops his sword in flames and charges, piercing through Seriel with everything he had.